Okay, now the feed is back. The fuck? Um. Okay, the feed is back. Hey everyone. Okay, the feed is back. So we need to tweet this out. Hello again. Please tweet this out, and thank you so much for the super chat. Let's see. How do we tweet this out? Okay. Can you? Okay. So now, can people? I know there's a delay between me and So we'll please participate and type a lot. Janet, can you speak?
Hello?
Yeah.
Can you hear
So
me?
is we can hear you, and and like we can see you on the feed. Perfect. Okay.
Okay.
So for some odd reason the other stream app just
I think
went.
there was an issue with it all day because remember I was trying to get into it all day and it was giving me, it was, I just couldn't do certain things. So I think it was basically the Streamlabs just being kind of funky.
Yeah, well, on the plus side, we'll figure this out. We'll re-upload the interview. We'll put up the interview as soon as we tweet this out. Can everyone tweet this out? And I just tweeted it out. You're not bad luck no more, Papo.
Yeah,
Uh,
it definitely was the Streamlabs because I was having issues. I should have been able to get into it and get in as you, but it was being funky then. So I should have realized that we should have probably tried something else.
okay, well, we have a backup here. So Um. Okay. So I hope it's showing like a weird title, but I just don't care. Right now. Thank you for the super chat, Norval. Norval Rogers. We appreciate this. We needed that money a lot. Um. Whenever Google is the most irregular payer. They just like randomly send you deposits very randomly. You just don't know when. Um.
Yeah.
Okay. So we need our audience back, and I need.
All right. So is this late night with Lennon, right? That one.
Yeah, I ended up, yeah, the Henry Kissinger. Okay, Janet, can you talk a little bit and I can try to fix the title, okay?
Okay. Yeah, so we were as I was saying before, we had Gerald Horne, we have Scott Ritter, which is kind of interesting. But we wanted to keep that interview in there because it is important. Does bring up certain points. And then we're gonna go to Graham Elwood. My face is all red. I'm sorry. But anyhow, yeah, so we were throwing that all together today. I knew there was issues with the Streamlab, but I thought it was on my end, and apparently it was Streamlab. So anyhow,
So we got the title fixed. Let's me tweet this out once more. Thank you so much for your patience. And I will be all ready.
okay, and yeah, I'm gonna tweet out too. Um, yeah. So do you want to just go into the video? Or you want to wait a couple more minutes?
Let's wait a couple of more minutes.
Okay, we'll just get everyone in here, and then we'll put the video up. Oh, what a day! It's been that kind of week, honestly, for everything for me. So it's probably me. It's not Nomo. It was me. I'm the bad luck one. All right. I want
Okay, we
to.
everyone. Oh, okay, everyone. Okay, so there has to be a way where we can see everyone. Mother effer. Okay, we can't.
What? See the
Okay.
chat or?
Yeah, but we people can call in. I can't see. I can't. Scheiße. Okay. Well, okay. So let's see.
Is it just chatting here in Riverside, or is it?
There should be like a chat for everyone, but oh, okay, okay, okay. Okay. So we can do things like
You use this.
we
Thank
have
you.
sound
Thank
effects.
you.
Okay.
Thank you for
Okay. So
clapping for me.
now,
All right. What are you doing, Asha?
I'm trying to share
We
the
have to.
video.
Oh, you're trying to stop the video there? Okay.
Yeah. Um.
Yeah, you're not used to using this. I wonder if. Ooh, I might even be able to do the video from here.
Okay. Do it if you can.
I don't know. Let me see. Screen. Nope. It had like a presentation thing. I don't know what that was. Oh, it's a slide presentation, not. I can't upload the
And
video.
we can't. So. Well, okay. I will just share the video right now. Okay.
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 Anywho, Kissinger's dead. If you didn't know, that's what we were going to talk about. I don't know what's
Hold
going on.
on.
Okay.
Will it? Okay. Can you guys sit?
I see it. I can't hear it. Esha, I don't think you can hear it.
Oh, so yes, you're right. So basically, from 1930 onwards, in schools, they were teaching nothing but fascist propaganda.
Eh, Like it's not. You can't hear it, and sorry, everyone.
Hold on.
I mean, I have StreamYard, but I don't have historically YouTube set up on that, so I'd need to do the stream key and do all that.
So, as our audience knows by now,
The audio better
the
now.
late Secretary of State and War criminal Henry Kissinger has passed away at the age of 100. You may recall that the late Black comedian Moms Mabley once said that when someone passes, if you don't have anything good to say about them, do not say anything. I say in response, Henry Kissinger passed away. Good. And I say that because you know that he was born in Germany about a century ago, that he grew up under the fascists and the Nazis in Germany, but apparently.
Oh, so yes, you're right. So basically, from 1930 onwards, in schools, they were teaching nothing but fascist propaganda.
And obviously, he was an apt student. But at a certain point, his family migrated to Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan, and he went to school there, joined the U.S. military in an intelligence and counterintelligence role. From there to Harvard University, because supposedly he was a good student, where he matriculated and received a doctorate in the early 1950s. But he was catapulted into prominence by publishing his first book on so-called limited nuclear war, believe it or not.
What does that mean?
That means that the United States, as might have been said at the time, could get the drop on the Ruskies and bomb them back to the Stone Age or into non-existence and carry on with their lives. That attracted the attention of Governor Nelson Rockefeller, the heir to an oily and oil-based fortune, the governor of New York State. You may recall that Governor Rockefeller lost the 1964 nomination to be the Republican nominee for president to the ultra-rightist senator from Arizona, Barry Goldwater, who was an extremist of a rare sort.
Well, it's kind of funny. When you said ultra-rightist senator from Arizona, John McCain's face popped up in my imagination, and that just made me laugh a little, how little things change over the years.
Well, actually, Goldwater makes John McCain seem like a Marxist.
Oh, okay.
In any case, after the defeat of Rockefeller, Mr. Kissinger leapfrogs into the arms of the 1968 nominee on the GOP ticket for president, Richard M. Nixon, who prevails. There are many stories at the time that Nixon and Kissinger were involved in helping to scuttle peace talks with the Vietnamese during the run-up to the November 1968 election. In any case,
treason?
Well, some have called it worse than that.
Okay.
But in any case, he becomes National Security Advisor and ultimately Secretary of State. And he makes his dastardly reputation in a number of ways, helping to mastermind September 11, 1973, the bloody coup against Salvador Allende's socialist regime in Chile. Also, with regard to the so-called secret bombing of Cambodia, it was no secret to the Cambodian people who had bombs dropped on their heads.
And his famous order was kill anything that moves, everything that flies, or the other way, or right?
Of course, and not to mention the massacres in East Timor. But what strikes my attention is his really remarkable role in Southern Africa. Recall that in 1975, Mozambique in East Africa, a former Portuguese colony, was coming to independence, not least because of the Portuguese Revolution of April 1974.
The Flower Revolution.
Exactly. Across the continent and Angola, you had a similar anti-colonial uprising that was vouchsafed by the dispatching of Cuban troops to foil an invasion from apartheid South Africa. What happens is that Kissinger and Nixon argue that the Cubans were a proxy for Moscow, that they were not acting on their own.
Everyone's a proxy to Moscow all the time.
Yes, that has a lengthy vintage, I'm afraid. And that leads to a wrecking of the détente process. And then
which détente process?
Between Moscow and Washington.
Okay. Sorry. Great. Let's continue.
Right. Because the Cuban intervention was blamed on Moscow, you see.
Yes, because Cubans are not able to think independently. They need evil Russians to be marionettes.
Mm-hmm. And prior to that, approximately 50 years ago, there was the overtures to the People's Republic of China on an anti-Soviet basis. The price was rather steep, massive foreign direct investment into China, which helps to create this juggernaut. And interestingly enough, after stepping down from office, Kissinger, like many U.S. officials before and since, capitalizes upon the policy he helped to execute. That is to say, he accumulates a major fortune through his firm, Kissinger Associates, which is a door opener for Fortune 500 corporations that seek to invest in China. It's estimated that from the early 1970s up until virtually the day he died, he made about 100 trips to China, believe it or not. And this escapade, I'm afraid to say, was not unique to Kissinger. As they say in Washington, it was bipartisan. What I mean by that is that Madeleine Albright, who was Secretary of State under Bill Clinton, also, interestingly enough, with Eastern European roots, after she left office, she too set up a consultant firm that capitalized upon policies that she helped to formulate. And as well, I find this quite extraordinary, the United Auto Workers has been in the news quite a bit of late because of the strike that it just won against the Big Three in Michigan. Well, Leonard Woodcock, who was formerly the leader of the United Auto Workers, he became, under Jimmy Carter, the U.S. ambassador to China at a time when U.S. corporations were crossing the Pacific, taking their facilities and plants with them, which is a rather ironic deed for a union leader in a
Well, it reminds me of the role of what I jokingly call AFL-CIA in Chile and their role in Solidarność in Poland. So to me, it seems like a lot of American unions kind of betray working class all over the world.
Well, of course, we could even digress with regard to apartheid South Africa.
Please let us.
And how its economy was built up by the runaway shops, auto manufacturers, rubber plants from Akron, Ohio. The list is long, capitalizing upon the cheap labor of Black workers in South Africa working for neo-slave wages. This has been a hallmark of not only U.S. foreign policy, but as you've suggested, the foreign policy executed by the AFL-CIA. And it's ironic because it obviously betrayed the interests of dues-paying union members. Obviously, these sorts of policies also help to induce a certain kind of cynicism amongst the U.S. working class, who unfortunately come to see leaders, be they leaders like Kissinger or leaders like Leonard Woodcock, as being out to line their own pockets and not serving the public interest in the case of Kissinger or the workers' interests in the case of Leonard Woodcock. Thank you.
And you're absolutely right. And this cynicism unfortunately applies to like other places where the leaders are good, like in Libya. And so Americans are always like, you see, like if you add the word freedom, they'll approve of like any color revolution or one of those tactics and any violent overthrow because of quote unquote freedom without understanding what are they privatizing? What are, like, is the water going to be privatized? What about the rain and things like that? You're absolutely right about the cynicism, which is actually why I'm here in Russia to help writing hopefully my first book, which a lot of is inspired by your books, of course. One question I do have is around the time Kissinger was Secretary of State, there was the Zimbabwe Liberation War, or some other people call it the Rhodesian Civil War. Like, what was the State Department's role? What was Kissinger's role, if any? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I just wrote a piece in a book that's just dropped from Verso. And my understanding is that the article that I wrote is also excerpted in Jacobin, the publication out of the United States. And in that book, I detail about how Kissinger was seeking to foil Zimbabwean liberation. Recall that in 1965, the white minority regime in what was then called Rhodesia seceded from the British Empire because they thought that Britain was moving towards one person, one vote, which would mean
that
African majority.
So familiar to me. It sounds just like another country.
Yes, another country whose inhabitants hopefully are listening to our discussion. But in any case, that led to a war that culminates in 1980 in independence. Now, Kissinger was seeking to foil independence, but it was rather difficult. And actually, the hammer over the heads of both Kissinger and the Rhodesian minority regime was the possibility that Cuban troops would intervene in that particular conflict. And I talk about this at length in my book, White Supremacy Confronted U.S. Imperialism.
Oh, I have that. And I always laugh because it's such a big book because there's so much white supremacy to confront.
Right. And so Kissinger, and what's interesting about that episode that I detail in the aforementioned Verso book and the Jacobin article is that Kissinger was working overtime to foil a Black majority rule.
How did he do that?
Well, basically by making an alliance with apartheid South Africa, by looking the other way as hundreds, perhaps thousands of Euro-American mercenaries flooded into that country. Recall that this...
Because Rhodesia itself does not have enough white people to actually form an army, because a lot, and like willing army at least. And so you need foreign mercenaries. That sounds a lot like the current war here in Ukraine and Russia. But let's, so he helped, he turned a blind eye, or did he facilitate the flow of mercenaries?
To the best of our understanding, he turned a blind eye. But you know how history works. Evidence will likely emerge ultimately that he facilitated. The problem, as you suggested, is that out of a population then of about 10 million, only 250,000 were Europeans. Contrast South Africa across the border, where there was a European population of about 5 million out of a population of about 50 to 55 million. So that helps to create fertile conditions for the arrival of mercenaries, many of whom are buried in the soil of Zimbabwe to this very day. I should also mention, as I mentioned in the aforementioned pieces, that there's evidence to suggest that a number of leading U.S. officials had relatives, or kith and kin, as the Rhodesians used to say, in that part of the world, including Nancy McGuinness, who was the second wife of Mr. Kissinger.
Oh!
And including also Lyndon Baines Johnson. There was a famous or infamous Baines School in Rhodesia. But in any case, Kissinger was being blamed by the Republican Party base for selling out the Rhodesians, for losing Rhodesia to the so-called communists, Black communists at that. But that almost cost his supervisor, U.S. President Gerald Ford, the GOP nomination, as Ronald Wilson Reagan was running hard at Gerald Ford from the right. But then, as was his tendency, Governor Reagan made a gaffe in terms of being interpreted as suggesting that U.S. troops officially would be landing in Southern Africa. And that was too much even for the hard right GOP base.
That's very interesting. I didn't know about it. But then 4 years later, Governor Reagan, so basically during the civil rights movement, a few civil rights workers ended up getting lynched and burnt in this town in Mississippi. And that's where he announced his campaign, right?
Correct. You're referring to the killing in Philadelphia, Mississippi, of Schwerner, Cheney, and Goodman, these voting rights activists in Neshoba County, Mississippi, when running for president, which he won, as you know, in 1980. He gave one of his opening speeches in Philadelphia, Mississippi, pledging to make sure that to get the government off the backs of the people, which was interpreted as allowing the racists to run amok. That's how it was interpreted. And then actually, that was a fair interpretation.
And I mean, he did definitely get endorsed by the KKK, which he later pretended to disavow or something like that.
Well, that's likely. I can't pluck that out of my memory bank.
Oh, okay, I can though. I do remember in 1984 and in 1980, he definitely got endorsed by the KKK leaders. And he, of course, he was happy because it helped rile up his base, but he later kind of pretended that he thought it was horrible.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds like Mr. Reagan.
Yeah, and unfortunately, as I joke, this is Ronald Reagan's 11th term as president.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, well, I mean, hasn't every president been kind of more? I mean, Obama publicly admitted that his policies resemble Ronald Reagan's more than any Democrats in 2012.
Well, a historian wrote a book called The Age of Reagan, which he used to describe the last few decades of U.S. political rule. And there's something to be said for that descriptor.
Yeah. So do you think so okay, one really interesting point you bring up is that so the Republican base was very riled up. They were sending funds, arms, whatever extra mercs over to Rhodesia. Do you think that ended up having a boomerang effect in that it allowed without this would Ronald Reagan have not been? It's hard to do what ifs, but how did that help catapult Ronald Reagan to fame?
Well, I mean, first of all, Gerald Ford was only in the House of Representatives before being plucked out of obscurity to become Nixon's vice president after Nixon's vice president, the former governor of Maryland, Spiro Agnew, was driven out of office because of corruption and other misdeeds. And Gerald Ford did not have a substantial political base. Ronald Wilson Reagan was governor of California,
the largest state
political base. And so it was a kind of mismatch from the inception. And it was clear that Reagan would present a stiff challenge to Mr. Ford. And certainly after coming in a close second in 1975-76, he almost cakewalked into getting the nomination by 1979-1980.
Yeah, and the former leader of Libya, Muammar Gaddafi, called Ronald Reagan a second Hitler, and I can't say he's wrong with all the destructiveness that his legacy has left.
Well, yes. And one of the points I like to stress in my work is that these malevolent figures have a mass base. That's what needs to be recognized, that it's not as if they parachute into the White House unaccompanied by millions of supporters. They have millions of supporters. And that's something I'm afraid that many of our friends on the left find difficult to accept for whatever reason. But if you don't accept that, then it's difficult to struggle against these tendencies, because perhaps you feel that all you have to do is get rid of an individual and everything will be hunky-dory, when actually we're talking about millions of supporters. Donald Trump got 75 million votes in 2020.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Can you go ahead? I didn't mean to interrupt. Can you continue?
I said Donald J. Trump in 2020 got 75 million votes. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, the poll suggests that he'll be waltzing into the White House within a year or so. So at a certain point, as some of our left-wing friends have to say, you have to grant agency to these right-wing backers in the millions. And of course, ultimately, you would have to do an analysis of settler colonialism, a term that's very much in the news nowadays because of historic Palestine, but somehow it's not applied to the ultimate settler state, the one that is now called the United States of America.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't understand that people vote, like they don't have the class analysis to understand that it is in their interest. There are some people whose best interest is to be voting for the reactionary because of the class position they occupy in society, which people just don't understand. Like they think it's a moral issue as opposed to people voting with they're like, why did white women vote for Trump? And it's like they voted with their class because that was in their decidedly best interest.
Well, they vote for their perceived class interests. I mean,
perceived, okay.
You have to understand settler colonialism, which was a class collaborationist project from its inception. You know, I wrote a book on the 16th century.
We've Dawning of the Apocalypse. That was really very enlightening for me.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, as you may recall, I talk about when London first dispatched settlers across the Atlantic in the 1580s to what they called North Carolina. And it was a heterogeneous combination of settlers from various class backgrounds, but all bent on accomplishing the same goal, which is basically expropriating the Native Americans and seizing their land. And with a little bit of luck and a lot of pluck, they could wind up having free labor at the expense of enslaved Africans and attaining the so-called American dream of becoming wealthy at the expense of others. So this is the origin story of this settler project. Class collaboration has hardly disappeared in North America. It's
a lot of people don't understand about the class collaboration because there is so little class consciousness in the U.S. that they don't understand how. Like we said, like an example is the AFL-CIO collaborating with the bourgeoisie instead of the workers. That it's like rampant in the U.S. Or I mean, the ordinary soldier, like why is he shooting Afghans or Iraqis like who are in his class, but then he is collaborating with his own bourgeoisie?
Well, as I said, there's a perception and sometimes a reality that this is materially profitable, even to those who are not necessarily at the top rung of the socioeconomic ladder. As I've said more than once, it would be mathematically imprecise to suggest that 75 million folks who voted for Trump in 2020 are part of the 1% in a country of 335 million.
Of course not.
That's mathematically imprecise.
That's a ridiculous thought. Yeah, you're right.
So I guess I've exhausted my points, unless you have something else to add.
Do you know much about the Biafra crisis and what
sure.
Henry Kissinger did there?
Yeah, but that's basically coming to a halt. What's interesting about Biafra, this is the runaway province of Nigeria that involved a kind of secessionist movement of Eastern Nigeria, predominantly the Igbo ethnic group, who have a reputation in Nigeria of being go-getters and oftentimes are resented by other ethnic groups as a result. What's interesting about Biafra, among other things, is the heterogeneous nature of the support for that enterprise. It came heavily, I'm afraid to say, from those who were Catholic, Catholic in the United States, Catholic in Africa, for example. As you know, about 20% of the US population is Catholic, heavily with regard to the Euro-American population, the Irish Americans, the Italian Americans in particular. And the Catholics, as Christians tend to do, have done a certain amount of missionary activity on the African continent, which paid off with regard to the Biafran crisis. Now, that crisis did not prevail for various reasons, although given the problems of Nigeria today, including inaugurating in 2023 a leader, Mr. Tinubu, who has a very shady background. You may recall that during the Niger crisis, inaugurated in July 2023 with a change of regime in Niamey, that President Tinubu was getting enormous pressure from the United States to launch an intervention for various reasons.
Yep. I'm glad you brought up Niger today, because a lot of people are just like criticizing it and calling it junta, coup, whatever nonsense. But what they don't realize is the first thing is that this new government, before France was like taking uranium for 50 cents per kilogram, and now they're selling it for $200, 200 euros per kilogram. So that's a lot of like hard cash for Niger. And today, they just like ended privatized, like this French company had monopolized the water. And they ended the privatization of that company of the water. So now water is back in the public domain. So I just kind of wanted to mention that. But yes, they were putting a lot of pressure on, because France can no longer do their colonial thing in Niger. It became impossible for logistic reasons for Nigeria to come and invade or do a blockade or both.
And of course, the Nigerian leadership had solidarity from neighboring Mali, neighboring Burkina Faso. Similarly, Mr. Tinubu, the Nigerian president, was under pressure from the US because he was a student in the late 1970s in Chicago State University. Had a very checkered record. In fact, there's evidence to suggest that he was involved in money laundering and other misdeeds. And the scuttlebutt in Nigeria was that when Vice President Harris was calling him, she was threatening to release to documentary filmmakers and other writers in Nigeria files about his ignominious past in the United States of America. And that was a kind of leverage against Mr. Tinubu. But anyway, he's cooled his jets of late, fortunately for Nigeria, fortunately for himself, and fortunately for Niger.
Yeah, and I'm like, and of course, right now, they are very upset at that a lot of African countries are not like selling their minerals at like pennies, and so they are trying to get involved in the DRC now. They're trying to do another coup, even though the current president, he actually went and lobbied Washington to sanction the previous president, which is really insane to me that it's even how the gall it takes to ask a foreign power to like sanction so that he could win elections. But they're not happy with him because he didn't cancel the mining contracts with China, which are actually 10,000 times better than those in the West because they get a lot more money. Like the GDP has gone, I can show you the charts, like the amount of hard cash they get is like way more. But yeah, it seems like the US thankfully is like having fewer and fewer places in Africa to lay down the pressure points.
Yes, that's true. I mean, obviously, there's a change in correlation of forces globally. We saw that with regard to Vice President's trip to Africa some months ago. Remarkably, every airport she landed at, be it Accra, Ghana, Lusaka, Zambia, or Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, that the airports were either designed by or built by, funded by Chinese interests. And the United States finds it difficult to compete. Although, note that I mentioned in my opening remarks how the United States, along with apartheid South Africa, tried to foil Angolan independence. Well, remarkably, within the last 24 hours, the president of Angola was just in Washington meeting with President Biden. And the United States now says it's going to be funding a railway in Angola.
Hey, wait a minute. You know about the vice president's husband and how he quote unquote invested in this California high-speed rail that was never built, right?
Yeah, that's a real boondoggle. But
so I wonder if, yeah.
Oh, you think that there's a connection? Who knows? But in any case, it was ironic that after seeking to foil Angolan independence, now under pressure from China, apparently, they feel compelled to try to emulate China's construction projects.
Except I've read this brief from the Council of Foreign Relations where they have admitted that they do not have the capability to build the high-speed trains that China builds. Literally, the U.S. does not have that technology. So whatever privatization they're going to do in Angola to not build the railroad is going to be... It's basically that's what they're going to do, I guess.
Well, this is not a railway for people. This is a railway to facilitate getting minerals out of the country.
Oh, kind of like like in South Africa, how there's the one from the Kimberley gold mine down to the port.
Exactly. Right. So you don't necessarily need high speed.
Okay. So maybe they will actually. Okay, if it's like for minerals, they will definitely complete that project.
Right. Right.
So you said you have a book release coming up. When is it, and where can people find out about the books?
Well, I'm having a book launch in Los Angeles. I take it you have an audience in Los Angeles.
Yes.
In Southern California, the Southland, Santa Barbara to San Diego. The ocean to San Bernardino County, February 3rd, 2024, in Leimert Park. You can consult one of my Facebook pages for details. The books are I Dare Say, a Gerald Horne reader, and Acknowledging Radical Histories, Conversations with Gerald Horne. And I should also say, for those looking ahead, that by the end of next year, I'll be dropping another book specifically about Southern California. It's entitled Armed Struggle, ?
I really like
communists, Black nationalists, and liberals in Southern California through the 60s and 70s.
Wow, that's going to be interesting. I really liked your book about the Texas quote unquote independent, whatever.
Right.
So I'm really looking forward to that.
Yes. It's going to be a big book. You think that Southern Africa book was big? This will be bigger.
Well, it was more of a joke that I used to make with. I would show people this book, like look at like when people ask, "Is there a lot of white supremacy in America?" I'd say, "Look at this book, White Supremacy Confronted."
Yeah, that's all too appropriate, I'm afraid to say.
Yeah, sadly, yeah. I mean, thanks to you, I have an understanding of whiteness. A lot of people don't have a dialectical understanding of whiteness. They're just like, oh, white people, or like they don't understand how it was constructed, and like all the like even the you mentioned this. It was I can't remember the exact name of the ceremony, but it's a form of cultural genocide where people who are like, let's say, Slovenian or Polish go go in, and then they are like come out as like American.
Well, as I recall, this is recounted in a book by the late historian John Higham, or Higham, Higham. As I recall, the book was called Strangers in the Land. He talks about a World War I ceremony where Europeans would be in their national dress, like Germans in knickers, leather knickers, for example, or whatever. And they'd go behind a partition and then come out on the other side in a homogenous U.S. type dress. And it was this process
creating whiteness,
liquidating your previous national identity in favor of this so-called white American identity. But what's interesting is that whiteness is in flux right now. It's ever been a rather unstable process. I mean, it's an irrational process. I mean, for example, Ralph Nader, Lebanese Christian origin, he would be considered white in coming to North America, or his ancestors. Whereas Lebanese Shia, they'd be considered third world. I mean, and what that betrays is the religious roots of racial construction, which I talk about, as you know, in my 16th century book. And there are those, if you look at the Jewish American community, which I think may be in for a rough and bumpy ride going forward because of this Palestine crisis and the boycotts that it's unleashed in West Asia and North Africa against McDonald's and Starbucks, et cetera. So there's a lot of upset in the U.S. ruling class. I saw a video from Istanbul where these protesters unleashed mice in a McDonald's, sending the customers scurrying.
That's a smart idea, by the way.
Oh, I see. But in any case, interestingly enough, Elon Musk is supposedly this billionaire with roots in apartheid South Africa, by the way.
And emerald mine. His dad used to own an emerald mine in Zambia.
Yes. So he endorsed on Twitter, or X as he now calls it, an anti-Jewish conspiracy theory, and then was forced to do performative penance by traveling to Israel in the last few days to confer with Netanyahu. Then he comes back and he's very upset because advertisers are leaving his platform, X, Twitter, and he's being defended, interestingly enough, in the Wall Street Journal, at least by a columnist. And what's interesting in this column is that the columnist used a descriptor that's usually applied to Black protests, to dismiss Black protests. It's called, the descriptor is identitarian. That means that it's sort of self-absorbed and it should not be taken seriously. The Wall Street Journal columnist used the term identitarian to apply to the Anti-Defamation League of B'nai B'rith, a very potent Jewish American organization, which, by the way, Elon Musk has been at war with for months now.
Well, I mean, with the ADL, they are actually pretty bad because what they do is once in a while, they'll, like these days at least, once in a while, they'll pick out somebody from the KKK, but then they add a lot of like Palestinian, anyone who advocates for Palestine is added to the list of quote unquote anti-Semitism. And so at the Gray Zone, we went through the database, and one case, so the ADL has been running for protecting Israel more than actually calling out actual racists like they used to do.
Well, sure, but Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, he gave this heart-wrenching speech on the floor of the Senate and wrote an op-ed in the New York Times complaining about what he saw as people on the left not sympathizing with Israeli war crimes and how he and others like him felt, quote, so alone, unquote.
Aww.
And what's interesting, he said he made progressivism seem transactional because he says, we were marching for Black Lives Matter, so we expected the reciprocity. I mean, I thought they were marching because they objected to their fellow citizens being shot down on the street like dogs.
And Chuck Schumer was not marching for anyone, and his voting record for funding police, militarization of police, shows that he did not do that.
Of course. But what's remarkable, his fire was aimed at the left or liberals. And as I was just articulating, what he should be concerned about is the rising right wing and what that means for U.S. foreign policy, what that means for Israeli policy, what it means for Jewish Americans, what it means for the Zionist and Israeli lobby. But that would have taken a certain kind of audacity and boldness, or perhaps even intelligence, that you rarely ascribe to Senator Schumer.
That is true. And I mean, one thing that Americans love to horseshoe about is they're like, we have to be equally concerned about anti-Semitism on the left versus on the right. And I always have to say, well, anti-Semitism on the left is somebody saying free Palestine. Anti-Semitism on the right is World War II. Like, right. There's no equation, like there's no stupid horseshoe for you guys to falsely equate there. Like, that's what sometimes is scary, is that they don't understand what anti-Semitism on the right really means.
Well, of course, they don't necessarily understand whiteness or white supremacy as well. I mean, I see in certain Jewish American comrades, they'll put on their whiteness hat and affix the misleading descriptor identitarian to Black protests. And then they'll put on their Jewish hat and talk about Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state, even going back to the 2019 declaration by the Netanyahu government that officially said that anybody who's non-Jewish is second class. And now, if that's not identitarian, I mean, I don't know what that term means. I mean,
it is very identitarian.
I mean, you're basically saying that political identity is based upon ethno-religious and or religious identity. I mean, it's incredible, and the people can't see that. As I said, it's a confusion. Or perhaps it's an intentional confusion.
Yes. I think it's intentional confusion because, at least on the part of the mainstream media, I mean, they may be, a lot of them are that stupid, but there is also some willful stupidity, if that makes sense.
Of course it makes sense. As the saying goes, it's hard for a person to take a position if it goes against their material interests, whether they realize that or not. Or their perceived material interests, I should say.
Yeah, and with like the media, a lot like you have like, why is Raytheon advertising on CNN? They don't sell to the consumer. It's because they want to control their content.
Well, it's just like the recent sacking of Mehdi Hassan on MSNBC.
I have as an Indian, I'm going to say that I'm actually enjoying, I know we're supposed to stand up for his like First Amendment free speech rights, but I'm really enjoying this because he was one of the biggest sellouts. Like, so he used to write for this right-wing British rag and basically like yelling at Muslims for being anti-Semitic. And so I just think I'm not crying tears for him.
Well, I'm not crying tears for him either, but I just think it's hypocritical to sack him supposedly because he upsets the vibe of the station, because supposedly as a host, you're not supposed to go toe-to-toe with the guests. And there's this clip that went viral of him going toe-to-toe with an Israeli spokesperson. And the scuttlebutt is it's not so much that it was an Israeli spokesperson, although I'm sure that had something to do with it. It's that advertisers don't want to advertise in a contentious environment. And supposedly he was too contentious.
That's BS. But today, Chris Hayes, interviewed Eilert Shakir. I'm probably mispronouncing her name. But in 2014, she wrote a Facebook post where she first said Palestinians are all snakes. And then she talked about pregnant women and how basically she said like Israel should kill pregnant women because they're going to give birth to a snake. And Chris Hayes just softballed her without even though she literally called for genocide repeatedly, not just once today. And not like so he'll face no consequences, while Mehdi mildly pushed back this one time, even though for the past 100 times he's defamed Jeremy Corbyn as anti-Semitic, et cetera, et cetera. This one, quote unquote, not towing the line was enough to sack him.
Well, speaking of Corbyn, one of the points I've been making in terms of my discussions about this issue is that I think that the Zionist lobby has overreached, because it's not just helping to sandbag the presidential campaign of Reverend Jesse Jackson some years ago because supposedly he was anti-Jewish because of outreach to the Arab American and Palestinian population, or Jeremy Corbyn, but even former U.S. Secretary of State James A. Baker III, a former Treasury Secretary, ran Ronald Reagan's first presidential campaign, a card-carrying member of the U.S. ruling class. His ancestors were Texas settlers and colonists who were involved in the liquidation of the indigenous population. He's a named partner in that firm that has historic roots, Baker and Botts, one of the top firms in Texas in the United States. They called him anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, because of his efforts as a Secretary of State under George H.W. Bush to try to settle the Palestinian question. And so when you're going after someone like James A. Baker, I mean, it's one thing to go after Corbyn and Jesse. I mean, come on. But to go after members of the U.S. ruling class, I think you're overreaching a bit. And, you need to think about that.
I would totally agree with you. And you're absolutely right. That I did not know about the James Baker part, but that is very interesting. And there's a lot to discuss with that, because you wonder, one thing that people don't know is that the largest Zionist organization is called Christians for Zionism, and they fund a lot of these pro-Israel initiatives. They lobby a lot for, and the entire Republican Party is captured by them. But they're not pro-Jewish, but they're Zionist because of some strange biblical doctrine, allegedly. So a lot of people don't realize that there's a big support in America by this kind of branch of Christianity.
Well, sure. You recall that the pro-Zionist anti-ceasefire demonstration in Washington about 10 days ago, one of the leaders of Christian Zionism, who, of course, has been accused credibly of being anti-Jewish himself theologically.
Well, he said Hitler was sent by God to send the Jews to Israel by force, or something like that.
And then he shared a platform with Senator Schumer, MAGA speaker Johnson of Louisiana. It was really quite shameless. And by the way, I had friends who monitored that demonstration, and they said that the press estimates were wildly inflated, which is something to think about.
I mean, that's a classic color revolution tactic, is where you take a close-up of the crowd to make it look bigger. Right. Thank you so much. And I as always, I learned so much. And hopefully we can have you back after the book release to talk about your new book.
Of course.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
We are back after the excellent interview. I will figure out how to arrange the people here so that we're not so narrow.
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, we hear
We
you
can
well.
hear you.
Okay, so Matt, actually, can you entertain people for about 2 minutes while I try to arrange the screen better?
Oh, okay. Can I vamp with Janet? You
What do
gonna
you?
stay?
No, because she kept telling me that I had to entertain them, and all I had to talk about was
Well,
me.
that was
You did
because
already.
I couldn't get my robot voice to like broadcast over the other one. I would have done it with you.
So,
Um,
how do you feel about Kissinger?
I'm thrilled that he's dead. Fucking took long enough. Been waiting for this since the Russian Civil War.
Pretty much,
Seriously, he was
yeah.
born in 1923. That's when the Russian Civil War ended.
Okay, so unfortunately, I cannot fix the narrow camera
That-
issue. So if I'm
that's
off frame,
okay.
it's up to the audience to kind of keep me on frame.
Yeah, we have a little issue. You sound kind of low.
Yeah, I'm holding the phone. Like I can see you guys fine.
Yeah, I'm just saying. I know that the view is so narrow that if I move a little too much, it's
I
going
know.
to mess it
You
up.
should go
So
get-
I
I
have you
will
in wide.
try to be careful.
You
I have
sound.
both of you in widescreen. Like seriously, I'm looking at you both in 16:9.
My phone's.
Yep, and please let's host. Please try to turn off your cell phones. Okay, so
Hey, I'm
okay, so
mute always.
what?
All right. So no,
I'm
you're.
on.
All right, Matt. Hold on a second. Asha,
No, I meant
your
please
sound is
turn
very
off your
low.
ringers.
Asha, your
Yeah.
sound is very low.
Hi.
And I'm shutting off my ringer. I had it on.
I can hear her fine.
You hear her?
I know
really
why.
well? 'Cause
I
hear
have to
you
be
fine.
exactly in front of this
Yeah.
mic, or else it does not pick it up.
Yeah. You sound
Yeah,
better than
you sound exactly the same right to the mic as you do sitting farther back from it to me.
Okay, I'm just gonna sit here like this. It has to be front facing, and sometimes I can't get this dial to be. Oh no, it's the wrong dial. Okay, but I don't know where that other dial is. But we'll.
Oh, you
figure
know
it
what
out.
it is? It's just that Matt was so loud, and my volume was
Well,
down.
okay, Matt.
Oh,
Can you
okay.
remember? Well, no, actually, after it'll fix itself like after we quit being live. Riverside can fix this.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
So
Oh, they have their own
Okay.
impression thing.
Oh, okay. So, my favorite. Let's see.
Farther.
My favorite. Okay, so I'm gonna go through. Well, before we have Scott on, I'm gonna go through NPR's, which is definitely. Do you remember a few months ago there was a stupid controversy about whether NPR was state-funded media or not?
yes.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Like, yeah, is National Public Radio state media, and actually, it's more owned by the petroleum industry than the United States government, but it is still technically state media.
Okay, so
It's like
let me.
corporations
Okay,
are
so
state.
I wanted your live reactions. So I'm going to. Somebody should share this with the chat. I just shared this with the chat actually.
Okay.
So we're gonna go through this piece before we, because it's so funny. But I'm glad Matt and Janet have not read it because they. I want your live reactions. So let me start reading.
Okay.
Henry Kissinger, controversial diplomat, foreign policy scholar, dies at 100.
Controversial diplomat. Wow, right out of the gate, right out of the gate. That's amazing.
Okay.
Keep going. I'm sorry.
No. We want live reaction. So if you have to laugh, let's laugh. Henry Kissinger.
Oh, okay. That just caught me. It's gonna be one of those.
I picked the worst ones. Henry Kissinger, one of the country's most important foreign policy thinkers for more than half a century, has died at the age of 100. He died on Wednesday at his home in Connecticut, according to a statement from his consulting firm, Kissinger Associates Inc.
Connecticut is the worst fucking state. Like, everybody says it's Florida. I'm starting to think it's not even Ohio anymore. Like, seriously, Connecticut is the worst fucking state. Henry Kissinger and Timothy Snyder occupy those four borders at the same time. It's like, I'm amazed the world doesn't collapse in on itself.
Exactly.
Like,
I agree. A cause of death was not provided. He's 100 years old.
Yeah.
he's 100 years old. I'm sure it wasn't a skydiving accident.
Yeah. As the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor to Presidents Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford, Kissinger played the major behind-the-scenes role in building architecture that enabled a more manageable relations with the Soviet Union, China, and major Arab nations. At the same time, he was closely associated with some of the most controversial U.S. foreign policy moves in the recent decade by promoting intensive bombing campaigns in Southeast Asia.
Were those intensive bombing campaigns controversial? Did people have mixed about about the bombed country?
and he was the Secretary of State. Like when he gives an order, it is not promoting.
The entire generation of these babies were born without eyes.
What the fuck are we even talking about? Controversial here.
I agree. Okay, and repeatedly turning a blind eye to human rights abuses by governments perceived to be supportive of U.S. interests. No, he actually told Pinochet to like kick people off of helicopters. Like, he didn't turn a blind eye.
No.
Yeah, no, that was. Yeah, wouldn't it be funny if?
Yeah. Though he never worked directly under a U.S. president again after Ford left office, Kissinger's achievements were long-lasting. The U.S. superpower relations to this day still bear his imprint, and he remained a sought-after voice on international affairs to the end of his life. Jesus Christ.
Well, they didn't listen to him on Ukraine. They didn't listen to him on Ukraine at all, so...
No, I know, but then I was getting scared sometimes because he was like, I said the right thing about the DPRK when Trump was negotiating with him, and then he also, his Ukraine stance is pretty decent, and his Taiwan stance is pretty decent, and I'm like,
well, the thing about Henry Kissinger is he's not he's much closer to Thomas Hobbes than anything else, but he does live on Earth, which is a lot more than I can say for liberal foreign policy wonks.
He lives on Earth, not anymore.
Like I will say that, but like, man, I got to tell you, like, I'm worried. I hate this whole thing that like everybody's doing now, and like I get, you know, like this joyous celebration, but like here's the reality: Henry Kissinger isn't rotting in hell. Henry Kissinger escaped hell. We are currently living in hell because we are in a place where genocidal freaks, these war criminals like Henry Kissinger, can live for 100 years and never once experience a consequence.
Well, actually,
like we are
a lot. Well, with Graham, when we get to Graham Elwood's, his stance is even more depressing because we decide that Henry Kissinger may not be dead.
Wait.
You'll see. Henry Kissinger was the leading practitioner of a post-World War II era. What the hell? It's because like everyone born in the 1920s turn like if you're born in 1923, you turn.
I'm practicing being after World War II-ism. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah. Like everyone born after 19, like lives in a after everyone like who's alive after 1945 lives in a post-World War II era. Okay, Richard Haas, the President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations. There were other great secretaries of state and a long list of impressive historians, but no one who combined the two pursuits as Kissinger did when did Kissinger pursue history? Like, when was he a historian?
Well, I mean, he was there for most of it.
He made
Like, so I mean,
history.
I guess you could just like ask him a question about something, and like he probably saw it or orchestrated it in a smoke-filled back room, like whatever the hell it was.
What is he? The Forrest Gump of policymakers? He was there.
Yeah, like pretty much. Like, except like instead of being like Forrest Gump himself, he's like the evil shoulder demon telling Robert Zemeckis to like take all the black people out of history and like make this one dumb white guy do everything.
Having arrived as a teenage refugee from Nazi Germany, Kissinger never lost his thick German accents, his pronouncements on foreign policy challenges, delivered in a gruff baritone voice that made him a global celebrity.
Yeah, he had the other Chomsky voice.
Yeah, the other Chomsky, exactly. I
My
remember
husband
walking
does
down
Henry
Manhattan
Kissinger.
Street, walking down the street in Manhattan with him. He would attract a crowd like a movie star, a rock star, called David Rothkopf, who worked for a time as the managing director at Henry Kissinger's consulting firm. That's a really neutral opinion here.
I was actually
Yeah.
I saw something about like all the women that he was attached to, and that was all just a farce. That was like
PR.
Yeah, it was all PR, like all the stars that he went out with, like the women and stuff.
Yeah.
He went out with Shirley
Yeah.
MacLaine. I didn't know
Except
that.
for Gloria.
Yeah, like people
Steinem.
would ask him about that shit, and his response to it to explain how it was happening was always like, "Power is the ultimate aphrodisiac," or like it's gross.
No,
Gross stuff.
Ew,
Gross.
I don't even want to. Ew, like I just got a bad ew. I just got grossed out by the imagery that just ran through my head.
Like those more recent like footage of him with his wife who's like 9 feet tall.
Yeah, we can put that up later. Okay, okay, hold on. Everybody, regardless of what they thought of, hold on.
She's like. She looks like the alien suit woman from Mars Attacks.
Oh yeah,
Does anybody
exactly the picture you're talking about? But I'll put it up like after the Scott Ritter interview. I actually have it downloaded a long time ago. As a superstar ex-diplomat, Kissinger was feted around the world, including in Germany, the land from which he fled with his family in 1938. Hitler at that point had been in power for 500 years.
Yeah.
And during the time, the Kissingers, like other Jews, suffered Nazi persecution. Kissinger once told an interviewer that growing up in Germany, he would cross the street whenever he saw a group of boys coming his way because he knew he was likely to be beaten up. That is very little persecution in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that a lot of people grow up like that.
No, I mean, Nazi Germany, like they had Kristallnacht, like, and then some people had like they.
Well, you know what? Here's
they
one.
say about Hamas, like doing things to babies. Nazi Germany did it to babies. So.
Oh yeah, 100%. Well, here's something that Henry Kissinger said. He said once that if he were it not for the fact that he was Jewish, he would be anti-Semitic because any people who endured 6,000 years of consistent persecution were clearly doing something wrong.
Okay. Hold on. Okay. In America, young Kissinger worked in a factory during the day and went to school at night until he was drafted into the U.S. Army. Here's where the bullshit comes from. Okay, so how many of all the concentration camps, how many concentration camps did the U.S. liberate?
Very few.
2. How many did? No, sorry. The U.S.
Because,
1.5. How many did Britain liberate?
Yeah, because the U.S. didn't actually let any of the gays or the mentally feeble out of any of the concentration camps. So, like,
but like of all, okay. So Britain liberated 1.5 too. One they did
Okay.
together, and so okay, just so we understand,
So
every
together they
other
made 3.
wait, Matt, be quiet for just a second. Every other concentration camp was liberated by the Soviets. So this is where the deceptive part comes from. Sorry, Matt. Now go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying. So like together, the Allied powers liberated 3
No,
concentration
they did not.
camps. Like
Together,
for,
they
for
liberated
the non-Soviets,
Oh,
and then the Soviets did
yeah.
the other.
Three,
Like
three. Yeah, together the
yeah,
3. Okay. I like. Sorry, I got confused. Yeah. Well, well, one concentration camp liberated itself, Sobibor, but that was a Soviet Jewish officer who did it.
yep,
Okay. Sent to Germany, Private Kissinger was among the American soldiers who liberated starving Jewish prisoners at a concentration camp in Alhem. Like I said, it is the only concentration camp that the U.S. liberated. So to say liberated makes it seems like there's more than one.
I don't think people understand how many concentration camps there were.
Well, okay, so we can put up a map later, but how little the U.S. did during World War II is that see the distance from France to Germany. They landed
yeah,
on France in allegedly 1944 June, and to go all the way to Bonn, Germany, they took a whole bloody year.
Yep.
In that same time,
Yeah.
the Soviet Union liberated like 14 to 20 countries, including China, like in 3 continents, basically.
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So, hold on. There's nothing more I'm more proud of having been one of those who had the honor of liberating the Alham concentration camp, Kissinger said in an uncharacteristically emotional speech. Oh, do you guys realize he also said if I weren't Jewish, I'd be totally anti-Semitic? Because who
Yep.
like people who have been persecuted, something must be wrong with people who have been persecuted for 2,000 years, is what he said.
Yep.
Okay. So this is total BS. Noting how often he spoke to various groups, Kissinger told the Ahlam survivors there was no one who meant more to him than even those who showed up for the event. Huh? That doesn't even make sense. In that speech, Kissinger dismissed the notion that the harassment he faced as a teenager in Nazi Germany had traumatized him. Sure, I believe he had any feelings and he was a sociopath, so he probably used that as inspiration. That's nonsense.
Yeah, sure.
They were not. Oh, wait a minute. Okay, this is what he claimed. That's nonsense. They were not yet killing people. That is 100% false. The Nazis started killing people ever since inception. When they even before inception, when they were the Freikorps, they were killing poor, illiterate peasants all over Eastern Europe. So that is
disabled and.
When Hitler became Reichskanzler, the first thing that happened was they were rolling out the trucks with the Gatling guns on them.
Yeah,
just take out anybody who was mad about that.
And they were hired to bust unions and kill union leaders. This is pure bullshit. A traumatic event was to see Alheim. It was the single most shocking experience I've ever had. Okay. His experience with the U.S. military in Germany made Kissinger a believer in the idea of peace through strength. What? His experience, I don't know what the hell that meant. Okay.
Otherwise known as Mike Bright.
Okay, after getting out of the army, he attended Harvard. His 300-page undergraduate thesis was titled The Meaning of History. He went on to teach at Harvard, becoming known for his hawkish views. And this is where the Kissinger is still alive, because Harvard still has the Henry Kissinger Institute, where people like Pete Buttigieg are graduating from, and there are many Kissingers being manufactured.
Learning the ways of their leader.
Yeah.
Kissinger's
writings brought him into the attention of Richard Nixon, who made him his national security advisor. Over the next few years...
Wait, did they just totally skip over the Rockefeller era?
Oh, yeah. Well, Gerald, we covered that with Gerald Horne.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, but like I mean, this article just totally they jumped from Harvard to Nixon. Like Henry Kissinger left with a shit ton of Rockefeller cash in his back pocket when he went to work with Nixon. Like
Exactly.
they're just gonna leave that out.
Yep. Over the next 2 years, he directed one of the boldest periods of diplomacy in U.S. history, known as the Vietnam diplomacy. Right?
Yeah, oh yeah. Code Agent Orange, that's real diplomacy here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 1971, he arranged Nixon's historic visit to China. Thinking strategically, Nixon and Kissinger saw the opening to China as a way to challenge the Soviet Union, China's communist rival. Oh boy. Before that visit, no US leader had dared to make an overture to Red China, as it was then called. After the visit, no US leader dared to question the wisdom of the move. I mean, that is a little bit true. But
Yeah, well, like what China's like if China would just like cut this like diplomatic bullshit and just it would be so much less cringe the way they talk about Henry Kissinger. Like just thank him for turning the US economy into Ving Rhames and Pulp Fiction in the couch basement. Like that's
and most of the China thing was actually all Deng arranging the Deng was the actual global 7-dimensional chess players, just so people know.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, all of this like Deng's idea.
Henry Kissinger was just the gatekeeper into like getting a shit ton of U.S. intellectual property.
Yeah, but the whole thing, everything that happened in it was like Deng's idea. Deng is the real 7-dimensional, 9-dimensional chess player. Then thank God for him.
Yeah.
Okay. In Kissinger's views, it made sense to meet with brutal dictators because he would want to teach them how to torture people if there was important issues to discuss. In like with Pinochet, come on. In a conversation at Harvard in 2012, he cited his dealings with Mao Zedong, the communist China's legendary but murderous leaders. Mao.
Oh please.
Oh please, yeah. Well, yeah.
Please.
Okay.
He seriously he developed Operation Condor.
Wait, the next one is so audacious. Be braced for this. Let me read the whole quote before the reaction, but brace for it. Okay. Chairman Henry Kissinger acknowledged Chairman Mao caused unspeakable suffering. It's an indisputable fact, but it is also a fact that he was a considerable strategic thinker in foreign policy. How dare he opines about who causes unspeakable suffering when his orders are literally kill everything that moves and anything that flies in Cambodia?
Yeah.
Yep.
During this opening to China, Kissinger was also meeting with the Soviet leaders in Moscow. For more than 40 years, the specter of nuclear confrontation had hung over the two superpowers. Kissinger's diplomacy ushered in a new period of detente and dialogue. This, I'm sorry to say, but this was actually Brezhnev's idea and Brezhnev's like thing to not destroy the world. So Kissinger kind of just agreed to it. Like he doesn't deserve credit for this, in my opinion, but that's another story. And arms control agreements helped diffuse the persistent and dangerous tensions between Moscow and Washington. And then there was Vietnam, where the limits of Kissinger's abilities become evident. Not really.
What?
Nixon sent Kissinger to Paris to negotiate a peace agreement. After 3.5 years of on-again, off-again talks with the North Vietnamese counterpart Le Truc Tho, Kissinger made a dramatic announcement in October 1972 that he would live to regret. No, it was because they were fragging officers and they were really scared that the whole empire would come crumbling down. And then there was also the oil crisis, but that's another story. We believe that peace is at hand, he said. We believe that an agreement is in sight. Kissinger and Lee Duk-to won the Nobel Peace Prize for their efforts, but their agreement did not end the war. That's because the US was continuing to secretly arm the South Vietnamese for another 3 years. No foreign policy advisor to the US president before or since had the power Kissinger had. This is actually true, and Scott Ritter kind of talks about that. He spoke to Nixon as much as a dozen times a day. Kissinger saw Nixon as an insecure man. Tapes of White House phone conversation shows how he catered to Nixon's emotional needs. Whatever. Mr. President, Kissinger told Nixon, following an April 1971 presidential address on the Vietnam War, this was the best speech you've ever delivered since you've been in office. When Nixon demurred, Kissinger pressed his point. It was really powerful speech. He insisted, really movingly delivered. Kissinger traveled constantly and engaging with world leaders on matters of war and peace because of his consulting firm and lobbying firm. People hired him to be a lobbyist. His frenetic search for an end to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict gave rise to the term shuttle diplomacy. Okay. Oh my God. Okay, this part just gets gross. I'm not gonna read it because it's okay. It talks about how he's good with ladies. That's just ew. I don't want ew.
They didn't bring up Cambodia or Laos or.
Well, no, not yet. So then they talk about ew. This is gross. Okay.
Wait. This is popped in my head. What was it like? I'm imagining Henry Kissinger's pickup line would be like asking someone if the carpet bombing matches the drapes.
That's a good one.
I didn't like that.
Okay, now I'm officially okay. They do not mention Laos or Cambodia fully once. I'm actually officially bored of this piece, and okay. So one disclaimer: my camera battery will die very soon, but I'll change it. One disclaimer is that Scott says some things that are kind of cringy. Like he does use the global chess part, but he makes but there are things I learned a lot, and like which is very important about the State Department not controlling U.S. foreign policy, but the Department of Defense doing it. And another thing is that he kind of explains how the system is rotten and how Kissinger is a player in the system. So even though he kind of delivers a little bit more of a mainstream point of view that'll enrage anyone.
He brings up some of the points NPR did.
Yeah. Please just listen to it. And we discussed this and we thought it was very important. He brought up like 4 very important things I didn't know that I learned. And I think if you guys, it's kind of like understanding how Nazism came to power. Like, it doesn't matter if you kill baby Hitler because you have to go back in time and kill baby IG Farben. And that's kind of what he said.
Yeah, it's like it's the point that it's not one man. Like it's the system.
Great man here.
Working in the system.
Okay, so Janet, go if you can share the video, go ahead and share.
Oh, okay. I didn't know you were going to have it.
Like on another
all right, so talk for a minute. I didn't know. I wasn't ready for that. I'm sorry.
No worries. Okay. So I understand many of you will be upset, but he makes a lot of good points because if the defensive department is if the Pentagon is controlling foreign policy, their only thing is like bomb everything, which is what and so he talked about the systematic weakness of diplomacy in general and the importance of diplomacy. And he explains, like, I mean, sadly, I've come to this conclusion too, that every president after Nixon has been more right-wing than Nixon. And it's actually, scary part is it's actually also true about Secretary of State.
Well, we're on Ronald Reagan's 11th term at this point.
Yeah, exactly. So
complete with the Alzheimer's now. We even brought that back.
What?
We're complete with Ronald Reagan's Alzheimer's.
Oh yeah. Okay, so let's mute ourselves and turn off our cameras and please enjoy this interview with an open mind. And we'll read the comments at the end if anyone's too enraged about like about one or two opinions he has. His infamous Senate hearing and before the Iraq War, and he's a national security expert. He was on the weapons of mass destruction checking. What's the official name for that?
It was the UNSCOM, United Nations Special Commission in Iraq. We were the UN weapons inspectors.
So, Scott, as being both and being one of the insiders in the national security scheme, and also an outsider, what is your assessment on the career of Henry Kissinger?
Well, I may be old, but I'm not that old. And what I mean by that is my adult life, postdates Henry Kissinger's career as an American diplomat, an American statesman, as an American war criminal, as some people categorize him. And I'm not going to debate that label. The crimes of the United States are many. They aren't just simply limited to the Nixon administration or the Ford administration, but the Bush administration, the Clinton administration, the Obama administration, the Biden administration. They've all carried out foreign policy schemes that I think would be cognizable in a court of proper jurisdiction as war crimes. But we also have to live in the real world, and that's what Henry Kissinger is best known for: is his pragmatic, realpolitik look at life. He didn't invent the Cold War. He didn't invent the Vietnam War. He didn't invent North Vietnamese Ho Chi Minh Trail logistical resupply of the Viet Cong through Cambodia. He didn't invent the political problems in Argentina. He didn't invent the political and problems in Indonesia. He inherited all of this, and he made decisions as the national security advisor to President Nixon, and later as the national security advisor and the Secretary of State, that were pertinent to the foreign policy objectives of the Nixon administration and the national security requirements of the United States. He did this decisively. He did this creatively. And some people say that he did it with a total disregard for international law and indeed American constitutional law. He once joked that the illegal was easy, but the unconstitutional would take a little bit more time. And some people wonder if he was joking because a lot of what he did appeared to veer away from the notion of constitutional checks and balances. So, he has a career that can be described as great. And what I mean by great isn't that it's a career that everybody's going to applaud. His career had a great impact on the United States and on the entire world. Henry Kissinger is one of those individuals that there will be no debate. His presence, his individual presence, changed the world that we live in. And today, we continue to live in a world that was impacted by the career of Henry Kissinger. For all the crimes that he's been accused of, I like to remind people of a couple things. He's the guy that helped create détente. And again,
can you explain to people what détente is, for those who might not understand?
Yeah, I was going to get to that. Détente. Again, we have to go back and recall that in 1962 there was a Cuban Missile Crisis, and the United States and the Soviet Union almost went to war, a nuclear war that would have been fatal to hundreds of millions of people. And in the aftermath of the Cuban Missile Crisis, the United States and the Soviet Union started careening down this path of a nuclear arms race, trying to arm themselves with missiles and nuclear warheads and delivery capabilities that would give them an advantage in a general nuclear conflict. They were preparing both sides for general nuclear war. The Cold War had effectively frozen relations. The 1968, when the Soviet tanks went into Prague, Czechoslovakia, the Prague Spring. At that time, President Johnson was talking about trying to resume some of the arms control initiatives of President Kennedy, who was assassinated in 1963. But these were pushed to the side because of the outrage in the West over the Soviet actions. Then we have the Vietnam War, which is creating tension between the United States, the Soviet Union, and Communist China. What Henry Kissinger did is recognize that this relationship, this Cold War, this arms race, was going to be terminal for both sides if we didn't find a way to check it. So détente was basically the opening up of communications to begin talking with the Soviet Union about issues that mattered. For instance, in 1972, because of détente, the Nixon administration signed and then implemented the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, one of the foundational treaties of arms control between the United States and the Soviet Union. This paved the way for the Strategic Arms Limitation Talks, SALT talks. Now, understand the importance of this. Prior to this, we were both building weapons at maximum speed. We were in a trajectory that could lead to a global thermonuclear exchange. And because of Henry Kissinger's vision, we brought that arms race to a halt. And we started talking about limiting this. We started to work together with a common objective of not killing each other. So that's not very war criminal-like, is it? The other thing that Henry Kissinger is famous for is opening up China to the United States.
So before then, there was what the Republic of China, what is considered Taiwan now, and the People's Republic of China. And the U.S. only had relationships with the Republic of China and not the People's Republic, right?
Right. And in the United Nations, the People's Republic of, or the Republic of China, Taiwan, had the UN seat in the United Nations. And this was creating a lot of instability and potential for conflict. China, the Communist China, the People's Republic of China, views Taiwan as an integral part of China and didn't and won't accept the notion of an independent Taiwan. But the other thing that Kissinger and Nixon were trying to do is to create a wedge between Communist China and the Soviet Union, to draw Communist China away from the Soviet orbit, to weaken global communism, so to speak. And in order to do that, they had to be able to sit down with the Chinese, Communist Chinese, and have constructive, talks about the way forward. But China said, we won't consider any talks until you accept a one China policy. And the pragmatic Henry Kissinger put us on the path of a one China policy, accepting the notion that China was a singularity and that while we would continue to help Taiwan prevent the violent takeover of Taiwan from Communist China, that we recognized that Taiwan was part of China and would be looking for a diplomatic resolution to this issue. This is, again, geopolitical genius. So this is the kind of...
Quick question. Before then, the U.S. had recognized Taiwan Republic of China as a separate country?
Yes, we recognized them as a separate entity. And we treated them as such. And after that, we recognized Communist China. It took a while. I mean, we didn't immediately open up embassies. It takes time to do this. And the final diplomatic opening took place after the Nixon administration. But none of that would have happened if it weren't for Henry Kissinger having the courage and the foresight and the vision to convince Richard Nixon that he needed to go to China, he needed to meet with Mao Zedong, and they needed to turn this relationship around. Again, not necessarily the actions you'd expect of a war criminal or mass murderer. This is a man who played a version of geopolitical chess in his head that's beyond the capacity of most people to understand and imagine. Again, I'm not excusing his crimes. I'm just saying that Henry Kissinger, like American foreign policy, is not black and white. There's a lot of nuance involved. And again, we cannot ignore the fact that he inherited a lot of the problems that, he was trying to solve, and the methodologies he was using to solve these problems, people have likened to war crimes. But those problems were there. Henry Kissinger didn't invent these problems. And his solution matrix, in addition to being problematic in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in Argentina, also gave
Cambodia.
us détente and an opening to China.
And by an opening to China, we mean by like the current like business relationship that basically the U.S. continues to kind of maintain, but not in the same way since then, right?
Well, I mean, that was the strategic goal. I mean, first you start off with diplomatic openness. You got to establish diplomatic relations, because only then can you have an understanding of, commonality of law. Americans can't do business in China unless there's a legal foundation upon which Americans can do business in China, and China can't do business in America without that legal foundation. That legal foundation can't exist unless they recognize each other. So, first steps first. The biggest step was opening the door. The next thing was diplomatic recognition and exchange of ambassadors. And then after that came the establishment of a business economic relationship that we had hoped would cause the communists to veer away from communism and become capitalists. Today, what we found out is the communists have actually been better capitalists than we are. But Henry Kissinger couldn't have foreseen that at the time. But no, he, this is, again, it's an example of the vision of the man. He also received the Nobel Peace Prize. A lot of people have mixed feelings about that, but his efforts to end the Vietnam War led to the Nobel Committee issuing a joint peace prize for him and his North Vietnamese counterpart. His North Vietnamese counterpart refused to accept the award. Henry Kissinger did accept it, and then after the fall of Saigon, he indicated that he regretted accepting it and he wanted to return it. But never forget that while we call him a warmonger and a murderer, he was also a peacemaker. He was involved in bringing an end to a 10-year conflict that had devastated that region and had torn America apart economically and socially.
We also had Aaron Good here a few months, almost a year ago, and what we've discovered is that every president since Nixon has been less liberal than Nixon. So I've been seeing the Nixon administration in the new light since then, and now I jokingly say it's Ronald Reagan's 11th term.
Look, you're right. Richard Nixon, has a reputation that's well earned, by the way, of being conservative and of bending the rules, shall we speak. Watergate didn't happen by accident. It was part of a very authoritarian bent that existed in the Nixon administration. But the Nixon administration did things that a conservative anti-communist president could never be imagined doing, like making peace with the North Vietnamese, like establishing détente and arms control with the Soviet Union, like opening relations with China. I mean, these are things that one would expect to be attached to the name of somebody like Barack Obama. But it's not. It's attached to Richard Milhouse Nixon. And again, it shows
and domestically, he opened up the EPA.
Yeah, no, Nixon did a lot of things that today, I think over time, and I think this will happen with Henry Kissinger too. I think over time, in the passage of time, as people distance themselves from the emotion of the moment. Because as long as Henry Kissinger lived, those people who despise him, those people who hate him, would dominate the discussion. But I think in the years to come, if we all survive, that historians looking back on Henry Kissinger are going to be a lot more tolerant of the complexities of the times that he lived in and the difficulties of the decisions that he was forced to make. It's just like we now have re-examined Richard Nixon. There was a time when you couldn't even say his name without spitting in disgust because of Watergate. But today people have moved beyond Watergate and they're taking a broader look at the man, his times, and his legacy. And he comes off fairly positive.
I mean, he comes off much better than everyone after him, is what I can say.
I think so. I mean, the only exception I would make for that is Jimmy Carter, not because of his presidency, but Jimmy Carter has had one of the most remarkable has one of the most remarkable post presidencies, and Jimmy Carter has brought nothing but honor and prestige to the concept of the president of the United States. But all other presidents have been dilettantes in comparison to Richard Nixon. The only one that I believe comes close, and it's not even close, but the only one that had a momentary uptick was Ronald Reagan in his second term, when he veered away from categorizing the Soviet Union as the evil empire, and he began putting America on the path of real, genuine arms reductions with the Soviet Union. But again, he couldn't have done that without Henry Kissinger. He couldn't have done that without the legacy of Henry Kissinger, but at least he did it. No president has matched Ronald Reagan's vision for disarmament since then. And I'm beginning to become doubtful that any president is capable of doing that in the political climate of America today.
Well, I mean, Russia pulled out of the START treaty, and it's a lot of it is the U.S.'s fault, because the U.S. was violating their terms too. And so I agree with you. So how much do you think his way of doing things stayed in the State Department after he was gone? Like, did he change anything permanently in the way the State Department runs its business?
I think what historians have found is that Henry Kissinger was very much his own man. He once got in trouble for an interview he gave where he described himself as a cowboy who operates alone, who has the courage to move forward. Although he didn't use the word courage, but a lone operator. So Henry Kissinger's successes were his successes, not the State Department's successes. Oftentimes, the things he were doing, the State Department was in the black about. They didn't know about it. To be honest, had the State Department and that bureaucracy had been involved, some of these things wouldn't have happened, because the State Department at that time was staffed by people who didn't agree with much of what Henry Kissinger was doing. He had a president that shared a common vision, and they worked together. But that's not the way the system's supposed to be. The system is supposed to be that the State Department, as a bureaucracy, is producing policy that reflects a president's stated vision. But what was happening here is that Nixon and Kissinger were working in secret behind the scenes, coming up with policies, and Kissinger was going off on his own to implement these policies, and so the State Department was left in the rear, just cleaning up the mess that was made afterwards. And so in this way, I think what Henry Kissinger did was create the legacy of a very weak State Department. And that has carried on. We have a State Department today that is one of the weakest. I mean, it should be the strongest of all of our major governmental bureaucracies. It should be far stronger from a domestic standpoint than the Department of Defense. But today, the Department of Defense dominates everything, including American diplomacy. Oftentimes, it's the regional military commander who has more prestige in a region and in a nation than the ambassador appointed by the president and ratified by the United States Senate. And I think the weakness of the State Department is a legacy of Henry Kissinger.
Do you find that yes, I also notice how at least the Department of Defense or some people like some area of affects policies a lot. And often it can veer everything into a more militaristic, let's arm these people, let's fund these, let's send more guns and more weapons kind of policy. Um, so do you agree with me on that, or do you think that it's not so much like that with
No,
the
I
Department of
agree
Defense?
100%. The bottom line is foreign policy and national security policy today is written in the Pentagon, and the State Department's job is to come up with diplomacy that supports this policy. It should be the other way around, meaning that how America interfaces with the world should be written in the State Department. It's the military's job to come up with the capabilities to defend that policy. But instead, we have policy explaining or retroactively defending military policy. We lead with the sword, not the pen, and it should be the other way around.
Oh wow, I didn't. You're right. When do you think that change happened? I personally, I can. My memory says the second Bush administration.
Well, again, I think that the State Department began to lose its credibility with the Cold War. Henry Kissinger was a very strong Secretary of State, but he wasn't strong because of the State Department. He was strong because he was a national security advisor and a Secretary of State rolled into one. And because he was a national security advisor, at the same time he was a Secretary of State, constitutionally, he could do things because the national security advisor is not ratified by the United States Senate. He's appointed by the president. So at the one hand, Kissinger could be a special advisor to the president in a way that was outside of congressional remit. On the other hand, he was the head of the State Department, which means he is responsible to Congress. So he was able to take State Department functions, move it to the National Security Council, and operate there in secrecy. This is very problematic. It was successful from his standpoint, but extremely problematic. So we can't say that the State Department was strong under him. We say the opposite. Look at the Vietnam War. Who drove that? Was it the State Department or was it Westmoreland? Was it the Pentagon? It was Westmoreland and the Pentagon. The same thing with the Korean War, the National Security Council. I think after 1947, when they did the reimagining of the national security structure, the National Security Council, or the National Security Advisor to the president, it took on responsibilities that should be with the State Department. And the State Department has just been weakened since the end of the Second World War, since the advent of the Cold War, and it's become weaker ever since. Even Madeleine Albright, who was noted for her her assertion of American exceptionalism. She was a very weak Secretary of State. She became frustrated at times that she confronted Colin Powell saying, why do we spend all this money on the military if you're afraid to use it? It's because the military was making decisions, not her. So I think that, it wasn't just after, Kissinger gets a lot of credit because he had the title Secretary of State, but as I explained, the more relevant title was National Security Advisor. I don't think there's been a strong Secretary of State, since the end of the Second World War. George C. Marshall was it, but again, he was a general, so he was.
Well, I've noticed this. One of the most glaring examples of the Department of Defense kind of stuff. So it was under the Trump administration when Trump tried to open up relations with North Korea, or at least begin a dialogue. And then we got all these people, national security advisors, come on TV and mention Gaddafi, and just scared that whole thing off. And that was very disappointing because they are a nuclear armed country, and there's no point in having this 100-year war or whatever long since 1953. You see what I mean?
No, I agree. Again, one of the reasons why we can't end the Korean War is that the military has the lead in defining the problem of Korea and what the solution shall be. And when you identify something as a nail, the hammer becomes the only solution. Donald Trump at least had the courage to say, I want to meet with this guy and shift the dialogue away from military to economic. The system wasn't ready for it. One of the problems with the Trump administration, one of the many problems with the Trump administration, was that he was somebody who was a genuine outsider. And so normally a president will come in and build a team of like-minded individuals. And when Trump came in, there were literally no like-minded individuals for him to build a team with. He was compelled to reach into a talent pool that was controlled by other political ideologies. And so that's why he got a John Bolton and a Mike Pompeo. These are people who would never have worked for Donald Trump under normal circumstances, but now that he was president, they came in not to assist him, but to control him and to sabotage him. He was undermined by his own team because nobody shared his vision. I mean, look, I'm very critical of Donald Trump, but I will tell you this, that North Korean gambit that he undertook had the possibility of bringing peace to that region and the world. Today, because of the failure of his team to support him, because of the Biden administration's unwillingness to pick up that baton, even though North Korea was willing to continue discussions with Joe Biden, has led to a fully nuclear armed North Korea, armed with very modern intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the United States and will reach the United States if there is a war. Very dangerous situation. Most Americans aren't aware of this. And again, Donald Trump was trying to prevent this, and he would have succeeded had he been supported. If Henry Kissinger had worked for Donald Trump, I think we would have peace on the North Korean peninsula today, because that's the kind of open-minded thinking, very pragmatic thinking that Henry Kissinger would have brought to the table.
Well, thank you so much. This was a very, very enlightening experience. I learned so much. It was not very clear in my mind about how the Department of Defense now kind of runs the foreign policy, and you helped elucidate this. Quickly, I know you have to go soon, but where can people find you, and what are your plans for the upcoming future, like in the next few weeks-ish?
Well, the best place to find me is on scottritterextra.com. It's a website that'll link everybody to articles I write and podcasts. For instance, if you send me a link to this, it'll be up there too. So it's a one-stop shop for people to go to if they're interested in what I write and what I have to say. Right now my projects, prior to October 7th, I was singularly focused on trying to jumpstart U.S.-Russian relations, not as a diplomat, not as a government representative. The Logan Act prohibits that, but as an American citizen, to encourage Americans to open their mind to follow in the footsteps of John F. Kennedy in his June 1963 speech at the American University that said, while we may disagree with the Russians on certain things, it's imperative that we put ourselves in their shoes so that we can understand their perspective on the problem.
That was the Pax Americana versus an actual peace speech, right?
Correct. And so, right there, there's just so much ignorance in America today about all things Russia.
I'm in Russia right now. Literally everything Americans think about Russia is like 100% the opposite.
100%. Yeah. No, I had the honor and privilege of visiting Russia last May. I did a book tour. And I visited 12 cities in 26 days and had the chance to meet, officials, but also the people on the street and have real open dialogue with them. And so my project right now is to try and capture that experience, both in the form of a book and in a documentary movie that can help educate the American public on that. The movie and the book are called Waging Peace. And that's a project that I'm involved in. Right now, I plan on going back to Russia. What I'm trying to do now is finish writing this book, complete this documentary film, and in support of that effort, I will be going back to Russia this month to conduct follow-on discussions, dialogues, meetings. Again, furthering the idea of the citizen ambassador to go out to meet the Russian people, to get to know them, and then to try to better explain Russia to an American audience so that the politicians can no longer exploit the ignorance of the American people to generate fear so that they support policies that leads toward conflict. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything Russia does. We don't have to agree with how Russia operates, but we do have a duty and responsibility to treat the Russians as human beings. And therefore, it's imperative that we do what JFK said, to put ourselves in the shoes of the Russians and to view the problem from their perspective. And we might begin to understand that the Russian people are not waking up every morning wondering how they can destroy America. In fact, I believe the Russian people are waking up every morning wondering what needs to be done so that we don't go to war with America. Not that Russia is going to surrender, because they're not going to surrender, but how do we get the American people to treat us as equals, as legitimate, and a legitimate nation populated by people that have the same beliefs, the same values, the same needs, wants, and desires as the American people. And that's what I learned by going to Russia. I'll leave it with this. There's a Texan. He's died now.
Oh yeah, Russell Bentley. I met him last year.
No.
Yes.
I'm talking about another Texan.
Okay.
A Texan named Van Cliburn. And Van Cliburn was a piano player. And he went to Moscow in 1958 during the Cold War. And he participated in the first Tchaikovsky Music Festival. And he won it. And in winning it, he won the hearts of the Russian people. And then he came back to the United States with that experience, and he began a process of this cross-cultural exchange. And so what I tell people is, be your own Van Cliburn. We all have a little inner Van Cliburn, and we all need to go over to Russia with whatever skill set we have, whatever talent we have, whatever who we are, and we need to introduce ourselves to the Russian people. And my experience is that if you go over as a genuine person, that the Russians are going to love you for that effort, and they're going to appreciate that effort, and they're going to make every effort to understand who you are and to help you understand who they are. This is how we prevent a future war with Russia, because otherwise we're held hostage by a mainstream media and corporate interests who benefit from conflict, not from peace. And we have to make the decision that the route we want to go down with in the future is a path towards peace, not towards war. That's why I call my project Waging Peace. Instead of waging war, we need to be waging peace.
Well, if you do come to St. Petersburg, we should hang out. That is where I live now.
Well, I think that's in the cards, and now that we have each other's contact information, I'm sure we can make that happen.
Okay, and thank you so much. This was very illuminating, and I really appreciate this. And have a great rest of the day.
All right, thank you. You too.
So, I forgot to turn on my camera. I turned it off to save the battery. So, can everyone hear us?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So, I do think the most important points is that how basically the defense. I mean, most of us knew this, but he clearly laid out how the Defense Department basically creates the policy, which means there is actually no such thing as U.S. diplomacy, and so the U.S. was always bang, 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 bang.
The other point that was even brought up in the chat and that I had thought about as listening to him today and, again tonight, is that it's pretty sad. Like if Nixon was better than what we've had since, you know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, Nixon sucked. Like, being like the least.
That's how far that the Overton window has moved. Like, that is how far it moved. That Nixon was more progressive.
Well, yeah, this is what happens when you have like 245 years of always choosing the quote unquote least evil asshole.
Oh yeah, then you get 99%.
That's because your only scale by which you can measure anything is your only measure. You're not measuring anything by how good it is. You're measuring it by how unbad it was.
Exactly.
No. how much we're in the
Matt,
crap.
can you turn down your volume on your mic a little bit because you're mismatched with us?
Oh, I think I'm probably just holding my phone too close to my face.
Okay. So yeah.
Is this better?
Yeah, it's better. So that is the sad thing is that Nixon was pretty horrible, and everyone else after him has been just worse and worse, and that's where lesser of evil gets to you. But Scott kind of has the same idea as Senator Mike Gravel, where he's like they both kind of have given up on the idea that you can do anything through Washington, and they're kind of coming to an understanding that it has to be done sidestepping Washington.
Yeah. That's why he's talking about being the citizen, going to Russia, being the citizen, being, I am a citizen in America, and this is what.
But like, the thing is, like promoting this
Too loud.
idea, way too late. Like nobody has any sort of like ability to travel in any capacity.
You're right.
Everybody's flat fucking broke.
Can you
We
put it
just
a
have to
little
have-
further away, please?
Yeah, how's this?
Yeah, and like pretend you're an NPR reporter, and then I think you're gonna get the same volume as us.
But
No, that's hard for me. I have a very powerful voice.
Okay, sorry. Some people were complaining about how your is much louder, and so that's fine. We'll fix it later.
that was me complaining.
That's because I'm on a phone, not like an actual mic setup.
I understand.
That wasn't anyone else. That was me complaining.
Oh, that was you. Oh, sorry.
I am left side chat. Yes.
Okay. Never
That's one of my
mind.
favorite.
I actually have a volume control on here. I have mute and on.
No, don't worry about it. I kind of do want to talk about Mehdi Hassan, who got fired from MSNBC.
Yeah.
In
Yeah, that's
2015,
fun.
hold on. In 2015, he wrote an article called "Why I Miss Bush."
I remember that actually.
Yeah,
We all miss the 70s.
I know.
I don't think I remember it at the time. I remember it being brought up before.
Uh,
But
and
I
I'm
mean,
so sorry because our normal app it kind of froze on us. I can't really highlight the comments because I don't know how, or maybe it's not possible. So really sorry about that. But please super chat us. And please hit like and subscribe. And the bell right now. Um. Yeah.
when did Mehdi Hassan write that Why I Miss Bush article?
2015.
Ugh.
during Obama.
Yeah.
Right at the tail end, yeah.
During the Obama era.
Yep.
Yeah,
Wasn't even
that's
during
right.
It wasn't even
before
about Trump. Trump hadn't even begun to run.
Yeah.
But you consider that like Trump was actually objectively better than Bush on every issue except immigration, pretty much.
No, he was better than Bush on actually immigration too. He deported fewer people.
Yeah, true.
Like actually.
Yeah, that is. Never mind. And Biden's taken a hard right turn on every single Trump policy. Hard right turn.
Oh yeah. One thing that's really speaking of Biden, and nothing changing. So I was like reading Maynard Keynes on the U.S. president during World War I. And if you next time, maybe next week, I can make some slides. It gets really funny because whenever he talks about Wilson, it sounds just like Biden, and you're like, oh, this like having
Wilson was terrible.
having a dead no,
Like-
no. I know Wilson was terrible, but the fact that he had like partial brain death, like was not all there is like
Yeah.
it's a long tradition.
Yeah, he was going to because of the fact his brain exploded in his head was the only thing that stopped him from seeking a third term.
Yeah. But yeah. Anyways. So okay, so Graham Elwood's interview gets very depressing because we realize that maybe even though Henry Kissinger is down under, not in Australia, but like beneath the grave or whatever, cremated, I don't know. Um, a lot of his policies are going to continue, and there are going to be an army of Kissingers, and so it was very this part we kind of debate whether he really died or not.
Yeah, let's talk about your poll though too.
Oh yeah,
You
the
asked
poll
if
we asked
Cheney or
who's
Hillary
the
was
most
worse.
evil person alive, Dick Cheney or Hillary Clinton? Who's winning?
Hillary was winning. I went with
That's
Hillary.
a
I feel like
really tough choice.
yeah, it was a very tough choice. I went with Hillary. I thought about
Okay,
it and I went with
okay.
Hillary.
So I think that
But I'm going to tell you why. I went
Well,
with Hillary because I feel like she still has a voice in what's going on. I don't think Cheney. You don't hear from
That's
Cheney is what I'm
yeah.
saying.
Cheney kept alive by like the Guyver's Mega Smasher at this point. Like I feel like I don't think he can go anywhere where he's not plugged into a wall.
That's
Like,
also
but
why I think
yeah, no,
Hillary
Hillary Clinton's still like making weird ass policy proclamations.
well,
Like,
and her spawn are in like all over Biden's White House. Yeah.
well, she don't have the. Oh! You mean like her spiritual political spawn, not Chelsea?
No, not
As,
Chelsea, but like people she hired in the State Department, people she hired in her campaign that like was like the most
right. Yeah,
dumbest campaign. They're her
yeah.
spawn.
The turns that where to drop them.
The only people who managed to lose a rigged election.
Yeah. No, I love that. Like no one else except like Hillary Clinton and Al Gore, of course, like losing elections where you get the most votes. Like that's amazing.
Well, there was one more, Grover Cleveland, but no, even
Uh,
more than that.
yeah,
Hillary Clinton had.
Andrew Jackson lost to John Quincy Adams. It only took 6 presidents for that to happen.
Okay, but wait, with Hillary Clinton, it was worse because of her Pied Piper strategy. She picked her opponent for the Republican Party, and the
Still
Democratic
lost.
primaries we know was completely rigged. Like there's like she had like 1,000 extra super delegates before a single vote was voted.
Oh, yeah.
So she is the only one who managed to lose an election that is completely rigged in her favor.
Wait, talking of that,
Yeah.
are they like getting rid of? Who was saying they were getting rid of the primary today? I don't.
Oh, Florida wants to get rid of the Florida Democrats want to get rid of the primary in Florida.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, fine. Fuck it. Like I have no idea why that party even has primaries to start with.
Yeah, they should
Like
just,
it's such a fucking waste of time.
They should just like go pick.
Like it just goes on forever. We all know who's gonna win from day fucking one. Like it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
They should just
Like they're on record. They're on record under oath explaining that they do not see any reason why they are under some sort of fucked up obligation to count votes like assholes. You know? Like they actually said that under oath. Like that they are not
under. Hold on, worse than that. They said that they had the right to like pick candidates in a smoke-filled back room.
Yeah, exactly. And added specifically that they were under no obligation to give the public a fair election. Like they said that the masses have no reasonable expectation of anything remotely democratic happening within the Democratic Party. Under oath, on the record, there forever.
Exactly. And we actually talk about this with the Graham Elwood interview too. Let me see if I can quickly read comments, and I'm so sorry we can't do the cool graphics, but let me just read. Thank you so much for everyone for being here. We might make this a weekly thing if you guys like it. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So Archie, what's it? This is so refreshing to see real people. You're on the right side of history. Thank you so much, Archie, for the £5. Please hit like, subscribe, and yeah. I was
Rock Archie.
yes, you rock, Archie. And then let's see. Uh, let's see. Uh,
But
Gerald Davis made I lost it, but he earlier made a comment about how I lost it. Okay, I don't have that anymore. The Democrats are capable of good too. Bernie Sanders, Jesse Jackson, a little bit. I mean, but they both like lost.
Bernie
but
Democrat, though.
listen to what Scott was saying, that he almost was saying you get in there and you're an outsider. So he talks about Trump. He was the outsider. You couldn't get the people behind what he wanted to do.
Hold on. So Nadia Yvette Chambers says LGBT may be the only thing Biden hasn't gone to the right of Trump on. Nixon and Kissinger were not still excusable. The rest are even worse. I agree.
Well, the only reason that Biden is even like remotely not to the right of Trump on the LGBTQ thing is because the actual numbers of people that are serving the empire in the military are dwindling to such a low amount they can't turn people away just because they're on fucking hormone replacement therapy.
Basically,
Like, and that's the only reason.
Yeah.
If it wasn't for that, Biden would be on like the same fucking crusade that these people like were groomers, like we got to ban hormone replacement therapy, like just like across the board. He would be right on that archaic ass train of thought. There is not one issue in 50 years where that son of a bitch has not been on the exact wrong side of history every fucking time. Never fails. He's never supportive of what is actually good until about 6 months after it's like confirmed to be the way we're doing it now.
So Matt, you don't like Biden? Is that what
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So okay. So let's Janet. Maybe you should start queuing up Graham's
I
clip.
got it all queued and ready to go. So it'll take
Okay.
just a
So
second.
let me see.
It's
Anything?
36
Oh,
minutes.
let me actually quickly talk about the Bangladesh crisis issue. So what was happening?
Oh, there's another Bangladesh crisis.
What?
There's always a crisis in Bangladesh.
We're on the Kissinger show.
Yeah. Okay. So basically, when the British partitioned India, they made India in the middle. Then there was East Pakistan, which was the same country as West Pakistan. East Pakistan is Bangladesh. So what happened is that you can't really run a country like have like a split country with India in the middle. Like it just does not work out.
Yeah.
And there was a big famine crisis. But back then, Kissinger was really in love with Pakistan, and he really hated India. Indira Gandhi was the prime minister back then, and so millions of Bangladesh has a population of like 200 million, and there was like a mass starvation. So so basically, Indira Gandhi supported self-rule for Bangladesh, and Pakistan then tried to attack Bangladesh through India, which is like the most stupidest thing ever. So obviously, the Indian army blockaded that. But then what happened is that Henry Kissinger convinced Nixon to send the U.S. Navy to like go just bomb the crap out of Bangladesh. But thankfully, the Soviet Union kind of understood what they were doing, and they quickly sent their entire navy to blockade the US Navy from coming near Bangladesh, somewhere in the Arabian Sea. And that worked. And thankfully, I know life in Bangladesh really is hard, but it's not as bad as it was in 1971, and this like evil very close to genocide that Kissinger supported in Bangladesh is very unforgivable.
We didn't bring up Timor either, like what he, his involvement in Indonesia too, right?
Somebody did really quickly, but
Okay.
the worst hold on, the worst involvement in Indonesia was not Timor, but it was okay. So in 1969, basically they put Suharto in power, and in 1969 they had a conference in Geneva where Western companies just kind of got there and wrote all the laws and like basically had no labor laws and turned everyone in Indonesia into a slave. And that is the model for globalization used by the World Bank for the rest of the world. And that is definitely, who led that? His best buddy, Rockefeller.
Mhm.
And Kissinger's was really, really involved in turning. He wasn't involved in the Jakarta method because that was under the Johnson administration, but in turning Indonesia into like a slaves market. So one example is that in 1998 there was a big crisis that hit, and the Indonesian rupiah just fell by like from 2,500 rupiah to a dollar to 10,000 rupiah, and so everyone's salary was cut in one fourth. But Nike was like, woohoo! Nike's profits increased by fourfolds because everyone's and that is the legacy that is really gross that people don't understand about Indonesia and the Jakarta method.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay,
I mean,
so
we have like what's going on now. I mean, like in the United States because of COVID, and then like them raising the prices. They're not lowering the prices on groceries. They're not lowering.
okay. Somebody said, "Привет, Иван. Спасибо вам большое, Анжелеза. Там холодно, да?" Okay. Привет, Иван Куплинг. Я сейчас в Санкт-Петербурге. Где вы? Okay, so, yeah, so if there are Russians, I say one line in Russian, and I said, I'm in St. Petersburg, where are you? So let's get the Graham Elwood queued up, and we might be back for like a final goodbye at the end, if we get enough super chats.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
Second window, got it. Share. All right, I just have to start.
So let's get started. Are you ready, Graham?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so it finally happened, and like that night, like around 4 a.m., I got like 20 texts saying Kissinger died, Kissinger died. So where should we begin? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's actually interesting to see more people in the somewhat mainstream media call him out for his war crimes. Like I think it was the Rolling Stone who was like said something like ruling elites more than the loss of this, warmonger or something like that. And
No, he said, yeah, they said ruling elite more in the loss of Henry Kissinger, while others have dubbed him. We'll put that screenshot up so that people will know at this point. But yeah, but so yeah, like in the past few years, Colin Powell had died, Rumsfeld died, Madeleine Albright died. And with Colin Powell and Albright, like their own bloody autobiographies admit to war crimes. Like Colin Powell said, we torched this village where this old woman lived, and we kicked her, it was just pure hagiography. So how has Kissinger's, I guess, actions come up, has made the mainstream kind of hedge their bets as opposed to the pure hagiographies we're used to?
Right. They're just like, oh, he was such a great man. Because I honestly think in the last month and a half, things have really changed because of the 45 or 47 days of nonstop bombing by Israel of Gaza. People cannot they're just not buying it anymore. I mean, the first week after the October 7th attack, there was this kind of standard, oh, Israel's just defending itself. There was no mention of the 200 Palestinians that were killed over the summer. There was not a lot of mention of the 1948 Nakba and all the awful stuff that Israel has done. But as Israel just kept bombing and kept bombing and kept bombing, all these people who probably would have in the past fallen for the Hamas is evil, Israel's just defending itself, were like, no. And TikTok, which appears to just have an out, it's just telling people that what they're looking for. And the young people who are just like, nope. And the overwhelming number of Jewish people who are like, Israel's wrong. I think it feels very similar to me in May and June of 2020, when everyone was locked up and then the George Floyd thing happened and people just were like, they had it. And they weren't even just protesting the cops anymore. They were tearing down Christopher Columbus statues. They were in Atlanta when they protested outside of CNN. And people were just done. And I think this is another one of these moments where the more people learn about it, if you look at this, the only people defending Israel are people that are paid to do it through AIPAC, or people who were raised Jewish or in Israel and they were just taught support Israel, and so they're just sort of propagandized. Anyone from the outside that like really looks at the situation and goes, wait a minute, this ain't right. And so they're losing their foothold on the propaganda. And so when that happens, so now Kissinger dies in the middle of this, and then everyone's on social media going, nope, Kissinger did this, he bombed this, he did that, he was awful for this and this. And so I think there's just more of an appetite for the truth. And look, Biden's approval rating is awful. The group that helped get him elected, 18 to 34-year-olds, are like 70% of them are for a permanent ceasefire, and they're not in favor of Biden's. He's lost his base, and The Hill put out a poll last year after the midterms. I just interviewed Dr. Jill Stein on my show, and they asked people in this poll, if it's Biden versus Trump again in 2024, what are you going to vote? 60%, 59 to almost 60% of them said, I'm voting third party or independent. That was a year ago. So I say all of this is like, we're done. So when Kissinger dies, and they want to say, oh, he was such a great humanist. Nope. They're just like, nope, we're done. And it's actually refreshing because I've seen so much of this way. I mean, when Madeleine Albright died and everyone was like, oh, she was this feminist hero that celebrated 500,000 Iraqi kids dying. I mean, like.
Yeah, and what worse is, I read her autobiography. She literally like I said, there's confessions of war crimes. Like she said, she cavorted, like she convinced. Okay, this is the way she said. She convinced people who wanted the independent state of Croatia to join in on the negotiations. And of course, we know the independent state of Croatia only existed between 1941 and 1945, like as a Hitlerite puppet state. So it's clear, like she basically said she had and she had a huge role in convincing Clinton to use every means necessary for bombing Serbia and just destroying the country. And so that was what's shocking, is that they put this in their own bloody autobiography, and then you see the New York Times are saying, oh, the first woman Secretary of State or whatever nonsense.
Yeah, I feel like I've never seen more people publicly talk about opensecrets.org in my life either. I've been talking about this on my show for 6 or 7 years. I tell my audience.
Can you tell us what Open Secrets is for people who are not familiar? I love that site, by the way.
It's a fantastic site. It's opensecrets.org. It is a nonpartisan, non-for-profit website that just tracks donations. So the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, is what monitors donations. Any donation $2,000 and up, you have to fill out all this paperwork. right? Like if I were to donate $2,000 to a campaign, or there would be a record of it. And if I did it through my corporation, there would be a record of it. So all it does is take public knowledge. This is part of being a supposed transparent democracy. And so you go to opensecrets.org and you since we're talking about warmongers, the death of a warmonger, Henry Kissinger, I did this for 2020. Type in defense industry. It goes by industry: healthcare, big pharma, APAC, and all the pro-Israel. So, first of all, Joe Biden is of all active politicians, has received the most money from pro-Israel lobbies in the entirety of his career. It's over $4.3 million, right?
Wow.
That's a fact. That's not a conspiracy. That's not some crazy video. That is a fact that is tracked by the FEC, the Federal Elections Commission, right? And when you go to this site and you see numbers like that, you go, well, why isn't the media talking about this? Because this is public information. This is out there. And as I said, the 2020, this is why I'm a big, both parties are awful. And if you think one party is better than the other, Joe Biden is horrible, but so is Donald Trump. And I'll give you evidence to support that. In 2020, the defense industry gave $49 million across all races, all candidates running House, Senate, and the White House. The top three recipients of defense industry money, number 3 at $800,000, Bernard Sanders of the great state of Vermont. So, yep, there you go. There's no Santa Claus. Not shocking that Bernie is still kind of backing Israel and won't flat out say permanent ceasefire. Israel's wrong. He won't do that. In the 2 position, $2.7 million, Donald Trump. And number 1, Joe Biden at $3.1 million. So,
and, one quick point. Guess, do you know what the Secretary of Defense Austin's previous job was?
Yeah, he was with Raytheon. Yeah, he was on the
board.
So
it's literally quid pro quo. I mean, we've seen the WikiLeaks Citibank vetting chart from the Obama administration, and eventually, if any of this leaks out for the Biden administration, there will be something like the defense industry vetting all the cabinet positions or something, right?
Yeah, it's so when people say, when even Trump supporting, if Trump was in office, we wouldn't be in all these wars. Yeah, we would. We would maybe be in different ones. Maybe he wouldn't have been backing the Ukraine one, but they paid $2.7 million. You better bet. When they say, Trump didn't start any new wars, I go, that's a pretty low bar that he kept the 7 wars he inherited from Obama going. That does not give him, he's not the Gandhi.
Brownie points.
No, you don't get that. So this is why, and when people start seeing this and using open secrets and talking about it, I'm seeing young people in their 20s talking about open secrets. I'm like, now I've been banging the drum for open secrets for 7 years on my show. And in my live chat, the last live show I did, everyone's like, Graham, I learned about open secrets from you. And I'm like, awesome. More people are learning about this now. And it is pulling the veil off because I always say on my show, follow the numbers, connect the dots, get the truth. The numbers are the numbers. I'm not making these numbers up. These aren't conspiracy.
Well, one thing I do want to mention with Open Secrets is that there is a lobbying group called the Kissinger Group, which was owned by who, Henry Kissinger, and he's made so much money, just as a lobbyist, so that whatever ghoulish thing he wants is kind of happening at a bigger scale after he left.
Yes. I mean, this is in line too. And this is why I urge everybody to go to Open Secrets. And again, speaking of secrets on my other podcast with Lee Camp, Government Secrets, we don't delve in conspiracies. We just go through awful things the United States has done that is a matter of public record.
That's exactly what I do too. I just read documents that I can download from the FOIA reading room, and then I just quote them. And people don't understand. These are the stuff that the U.S. government admits to.
Admits.
Okay, speaking of that, did you see the Yahoo article I DM'd on Twitter to you?
No, I did not.
Okay, let me quickly explain. They said that Henry Kissinger has has the least declassified record, and he's taken many of these secrets to his grave, according to a long paper trail. So things that we already know about that's public is that he has said, kill everything that moves and anything that flies for the bombing campaign in Cambodia, where they literally did that.
Which was
So-
illegal.
And where?
It was illegal. The bombing in Cambodia was illegal.
Oh yeah, it's definitely illegal to kill everything that moves, because that sounds like that's genocide.
Yeah.
But then now I'm scared to see what I'm just imagining what kind of horrible stuff we don't know about with Henry Kissinger or any of the Secretary of State. So yeah, like a lot of everything. You're right. Like like if you read carefully, the government admits to so much horrific stuff that you don't even need to go into anything that's like not admitted by the government.
Yeah. That's the thing. I mean, you just look at the awful stuff the government admits to. I mean, oftentimes Lee Camp and I use Wikipedia, Wikipedia. And I'm not an advocate for Wikipedia. The reason we use Wikipedia, we always tell our audience, this is what they're officially putting out. This is what they're admitting to. We go through all these CIA operations and so many things we've talked about. We joked recently because we were live at the end of our last episode when it was announced, when someone in the chat's like, Kissinger's dead. We're like, oh, wow. And you know, we were like, I said, I don't know. The two names we've mentioned the most on government secrets are Alan Dulles, former head of the CIA, and Henry Kissinger. They have been involved in more evil, un-American, like they should be in Gitmo, you know, getting waterboarded for their crimes against America because
Can you give me some examples of like Henry Kissinger you found like that you can remember off the top of your head?
Well, there's all the stuff in Vietnam and Cambodia. So one of the things that made the bombing of Cambodia illegal, we were not at war with Cambodia. We were at war with North Vietnam. So we were literally bombing a country that we had no business bombing, right?
Because of the Ho Chi Minh Trail. Basically, they were getting supplies as in food, water, like not even military supplies, but food, water, etc. Like from countries south or whatever, like a little bit south and east of or west. I'm confusing myself.
West of Vietnam, yeah. Vietnam has an east coast, and so it's the shares a border. Laos and Cambodia share a border on the western.
Okay.
Western border.
And another thing people don't know about is that you know which country the U.S. has dropped. The U.S. has dropped more bombs in Laos than the entire World War II theater.
Yeah. Yes. And we talked about the illegal bombing of Cambodia and Laos and how Kissinger approved it. We also talked about we've covered a lot of U.S. meddling in Latin America.
Chile.
Oh yeah, but it wasn't just Pinochet. I mean, Kissinger was involved. Pinochet was a dictator, which is a sort of a standard.
I mean, everyone says dictator, but he'd throw people out of helicopters, and there are mass graves in Chile that go across the desert. Like thousands or hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions, have died because of him, and he was horrible. Yes. But then, yes, you're right. There's I remember one State Department memo where Kissinger says, let's send coup money. He literally doesn't even coup money to Bolivia. And the person he's sending it to is Klaus Barbie, who was the actual Nazi who's known as the Butcher of Lyon. And he literally calls it coup money. Like there's no euphemism. So there's Bolivia. And what other things did he do in Latin America?
So it was Bolivia. It was Chile. I believe there's also involvement in. Oh God, we know this. He had some advisory to. El Salvador. The Civil War in El Salvador was 1980 to 1992, right?
Yep, with the El Mozote massacre, where they just massacred every single person except for one woman in this village.
Yes. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Kissinger had some sort of, he gave some consulting work or something like that that was Reagan who did that.
Oh yeah, his Kissinger consulting firm was definitely. You're right. They were definitely hired by the Arena, which is the far right government. Arena was the far right party that was Reagan propped up, right?
Yeah. So Kissinger's kind of fingerprints are all over a lot of awful stuff, not just in Southeast Asia, but also in, Central and South America. I mean,
and the Middle East and Africa.
yeah. I mean, like, really, Kissinger's name would just keep popping up as like, we're like, oh, that's our boy Hank, back in that's back in the news. Anytime I would say, again, like I said, of the 142 episodes of Government Secrets, I think Kissinger's name has probably been connected. His name has been brought up at least 15 to 20 times on our show in direct relation to. So that's 142 episodes, and we do 2 segments each typically. Leah does one and I do one. So you're talking about 280 some segments that we've done on that show. And probably 20 of them have Kissinger's involved somewhere, even if it's just some policy he helped push that later became something awful. Like he's somewhere in the building blocks of us taking down some country, and all of these places, they're almost the same old story. We had democratically elected dictator that either didn't want to play ball with America's corporations or just was like an
democratically elected leader, right?
Yeah. Well, democratically elected leader who then either calls himself a communist or socialist and or won't play ball with America's corporate or military interests. So then coup. And Kissinger is involved in so many of those. And then, so he's just, his fingerprints are all over some of the worst stuff that America has done, from the late 60s, from the 60s into the 70s and 80s.
And there's also the worst legacy, not the worst legacy, but even though he's died, there's Harvard has this like international studies degree or international relations degree. It's literally called the Henry Kissinger Institute, and you get people like Pete Buttigieg and all the other like drones, like clones, mini Kissingers popping up everywhere.
Yeah, the psychos. Yeah, Pete Buttigieg is a full-on psycho.
Yes, he bragged about like destroying homes from like poor people's houses, like in his biography.
Yeah, he's a psycho. Just him and DeSantis are the same. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Pete Buttigieg is lying about being gay just because he's like, well, if I say I'm gay, I'll get liberal votes. Like, honestly, he's that nuts. And DeSantis is equally nuts. They're just mirror opposites of the same type of just sociopathic insanity. One is going, well, I'm going to play the Bible card, and the other one's saying, I'm going to play the woke, diversity card.
I didn't hold a gun and kill random people in Afghanistan so that there are mass school shootings in the U.S.
Yeah, exactly. DeSantis is out of his mind. He thinks books are more dangerous.
That was a Buttigieg tweet.
Sure, exactly. They're both nuts. They're both there. Look, DeSantis was part of the torture programs, and Buttigieg was it
Guantanamo?
No, he did torture in Iraq.
Okay. Well, who's the one who? I thought there was like another like person running for president who did torture who like approved the torture in Guantanamo, but now I can't remember. But it's all
There's so many torture people. Actually, I can't keep track of them all.
Yeah.
Buttigieg was a Navy intelligence officer, so he's clearly CIA, and so neither one of them.
He's a total ghoul.
Yes. Which
and it seems like there's only, and so the worst thing about these ghouls is that they don't die. Like their legacy stays on, and you're getting like the State Department does more or less the same things with different language now.
Yeah, and they're more, I mean, they're not as, they've gotten better at it in terms of the coups and they don't do a lot of coups and they do coups and assassination. Now they do way more economically. They have infiltrated every aspect of it now, that it's not like we need to get somebody infiltrating the media. They control the media. The CIA has script approval off of a lot of big budget Hollywood movies, the Marvel movies and all that stuff.
Oh yeah, well, we actually covered that with an interview with Tom Sucker and Matthew Alford. And there are so many movies not even related to. It's not even an action movie. It could be like something like I don't know, some random love comedy, and the Department of Defense has their fingerprints over it.
Yeah, it's so. I think Kissinger, as he's probably somewhere in hell right now, is probably going, well, this next generation is going to be even better at it than I was, because they've really refined it. Like they would never.
For example, instead of sending coup money, they'll probably now send bitcoins to organizations funded by the NED, which is the same thing.
Yeah, I don't know if they would use Bitcoin. They might use a central banking digital currency, but they.
Sorry, my alarm clock. Okay, go ahead.
What time is it there?
It is 1:30.
Where are you?
Russia.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, I've been here for about a year. I'm working on a book. We can talk about because what people don't understand is there's so much anti-Soviet propaganda in the U.S. is that it's literally illiterate peasants who had nothing but their hammer and sickle. Like that's where it comes from. They didn't even have shoes. Who fought 14 countries and basically won. And it's like when I first talked about the Bolshevik Revolution to my niece, she was 6. She really thought it was a fairy tale. And then she asked her dad, can you tell me the story about Tsar Nikolai and the Bolsheviks? But Americans don't know the magic and what a miracle it is and the amazing, and all the feats. All they hear is, it's because a lot of American businesses, including President Wilson and Herbert Hoover's businesses, got nationalized, and so they got really mad at the Soviet Union, and that rage just ended up turning into insane propaganda. And then there was, what people don't understand is that in the 1950s there was a quote unquote, McCarthy had a communist ban. It was not a communist ban. Because in the East, what happened was that the strategy they used was called the Popular Front strategy. So in the East, basically every party that was not fascist banded together. And obviously they would beat the fascist party because no one really likes fascism, and fascism can never be democratically happen. And so what McCarthyism ended up doing is literally banning anyone who was not a Nazi into coming into the U.S. in the 1950s. And so what Americans know about the Soviet Union is literally really bad Nazi propaganda.
Oh yeah, it's part of Operation Paperclip.
That's why. What?
Part of Operation Paperclip, bringing Nazis here after.
Yes. Operation Paperclip. So one example is that in Canada, a few months ago, they had this Ukrainian Nazi, where they applauded and did all that. And then people are like, well, his division, the Waffen SS 40, the 14th Division wasn't really tried for Babi Yar. And that's because the British rescued them 2 days after the war and shipped them off to Canada, and there was no one to try.
Yeah. And when I went to Russia in 2019, I learned all this stuff about World War II that they don't teach us, 20 to 20 Russians died.
Absolutely. That's actually a big thing that I'm covering. A lot of people, most people don't know that the U.S. kind of did a half-assed job, and 80% of the German casualties happened on the Eastern Front, and the Soviet Union lost 27 million of its citizens. That's 1/4 of it. So my book definitely like ends at Victory Day when they plant the red flag in Berlin. And I want people to get the real story. And so that's where I'm here researching for the book, but I'm also covering the war in Donetsk. I've been to Donetsk, Lugansk, interviewed people. Like there's a lot of horrific stuff that is going on that the Ukrainians are doing to people who are living in the Donbas region that America just whitewashes. And you see all these like Nazi symbols like that CNN doesn't do a very good job of covering. And they're like, Ukraine has no Nazis. And you're like, wait a minute, what's that? Waffen SS? Is that what?
We're giving money to Nazis in the Ukraine. The United States is giving money to Nazi organizations.
Exactly. So I've been doing both of that, and so that's why I've been in Russia for about a year now. I did come for a brief visit, but now I'm back in Russia.
Nice.
Yeah, so we can definitely talk about it later if you're ever interested.
Sure.
I know you have to go soon, but do you? So since I guess our consensus is that even though he's dead, his ghost is still, what's the best way, his legacy still continues. How do we end the legacy of Henry Kissinger to make sure he's truly dead?
Wow. Well, I think part of it is the truth needs to just come out about who he is and what he did. And we can't let the mainstream media whitewash the fact that, oh, we lost this great diplomat and statesman. And it's like, no, we need the numbers of the numbers. And we need to show about all the people he helped kill and bomb, and all of his policies need to be out there. And we need to just put that out as much as we can so people see what's going on. I mean, this is what's happening, is like the veil is being removed. The veil of propaganda is being removed. And all of us in the indie media space have been doing it and trying to do the best job we can. And we just got to keep doing that, because it's the appetite. In the past, part of the reason Americans were so easily propagandized, they just like, I don't want to deal with it. It's not my problem. But this is the unfortunate reality, is when people are in tough economic times, they're ready to like, what the hell's going on? Why does this keep happening? In America, we are in a recession. They can tell us. And it's the other thing. Americans they're getting gaslit on a daily basis. The news says, oh, the economy's back, or the job numbers. And people are like, what are you talking about? Yes. Like, I can't afford to buy a home. The average price of a home in America is over $400,000. In California, it's $800,000. It's
after you lost your home in the previous economic crisis.
Yes. It's not.
Well, no, I agree with you on that. I think also another thing people don't realize is that a lot of these foreign policies kind of boomerang back home. Like in the 1990s, they privatized everything in Russia and tried to like even the water and all this BS. Well, they're going to do that same. They are now like eating up and privatizing so many things in the U.S. Every foreign policy later becomes domestic policy. And it boomerangs. So that's why you have to nip it in the bud early.
Yeah, privatization is awful. When anyone say, oh, privatization, we have private prison. That's why we have all of these people, primarily young Black males, in prison in America for smoking a plant. Private healthcare is why we have the number one cause of bankruptcy is medical debt. The private healthcare that leads to 60,000 people a year dying because they're denied health coverage because they didn't have health insurance. So we just got to get the truth out there, and the facts are the facts. And again, Americans in general, but especially Gen Z, because Gen Z is facing they don't have much of a future. They're seeing it. They can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford anything. And they're being told, isn't America great? And they're like, no, I'm not buying this. And
yeah,
that's to me where the labor movement in America is a ray of hope. And people just want the facts. And so we got to call out the facts of Henry Kissinger, of who he did, and Madeleine Albright, and all of them, and Hillary Clinton. I mean.
Oh, yeah. And Hillary Clinton said Henry Kissinger was her idol or model. And and then you see what she did to Libya and cackled like a maniac after that. And Blinken is I can't even call he. I'm not sure if he's human or a robot, but his policies are just as awful.
Yes, they're all awful. They're all awful. They're all awful. Republican, Democrat, it doesn't matter. They're all awful. They're all awful, greedy warmongers.
Oh my God, yeah. Oh, you know what? So, like, I've been like doing a thread on Twitter for the lesser of evils, and oh my God, some of the Democratic takes have melted my brain. Somebody said I prefer 99% genocide to 100% genocide. But the worst, and I thought that could not be beaten. And another like Democratic supporter said, I'd rather have, no, and another said, who would you choose between Hitler and Mussolini? And it's like, why do you think they're on opposite sides of each other? Then the worst one is the 99% Hitler versus 100%. Like they're literally, the lesser of evil has like devolved into this right now.
The joke I always make is like, oh, I'm voting for Ted Bundy for president versus Jeffrey Dahmer because at least Bundy didn't eat his victims. You know, that's
that's a good one. But yes, that's where the level they are at right now. 90, like one, half a concentration camp, 50% fewer so yeah, I mean, they both, as Ralph Nader says, the only difference is that how quickly they hit the knees when corporate America gives them money, and now it's more like what kind of they hit their knees at the same time. It's the style of dance they do when they hit their knees or something that's different.
Oh yeah, no. Nader's quote I think is the difference between the two parties is the speed with which they drop to their knees for corporate benefactors.
Exactly. That's it. And now I don't think even the speed is different. It's just the style.
Well, they just have different kinds of knee pads.
Yeah, exactly. That's a better way to explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Republicans have a Stars and Stripes knee pad, and the Democrats have a rainbow flag knee pad.
Exactly. And it's not like you're absolutely right. And for me too, the more I read about it, like I understand U.S. foreign policy, the more I understand how it's basically America, as George Carlin said, America is a corporation. What do you remember that quote?
Oh, America is a oil company with an army.
Exactly. That's more or less what it is, and yeah, and so thank you for coming and joining us. Did you have any important announcements you'd like to make on like what your shows are going to be, upcoming shows are going to be, and how people can find you?
Yes, go to GrahamElwood.com. You can sign up for my newsletter. You can watch my show, The Political Vigilante, and my other podcast with Lee Camp, Government Secrets. I'm at Graham Elwood on all social media, so please follow me. And December 7th, if you're in Los Angeles, you can see my game show, Anything Can Happen. Live, we're doing a TV pilot in front of a live studio audience, so it's limited seating. You can be part of the studio audience. That's Thursday, December 7th at 7 p.m. in Hollywood, off the Hollywood Walk of Fame near the Chinese Theater. So go to GrahamElwood.com for tickets.
Oh, I think is that the show you did with Ron Placone? Like once I came and I said Idaho, but I got confused if Idaho really existed or if I made it up.
Yes, you were a contestant on Anything Can Happen, the online version. Now we're doing it in front of an audience, and we've got cameras and this cool space we're shooting it at, Nova 3 in Hollywood. So you can be part of the studio audience if you're in Los Angeles, December 7th. Go to GrahamElwood.com for tickets.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And everyone, I love Political Vigilante because he really knows his issues. I'm not like saying that I'm not dissing other comedians, but Graham is like the only one who does deep research before he says things.
Thank you.
Okay, I was actually dissing other comedians. And we don't want to talk about this person because everything we know about this person is against our will. People somehow force knowledge about this person against our will for some odd reason. You know who we're talking about, right, Matt?
There are a couple of
No,
people like this.
I know who you're talking about.
the comedian
I
that
think I know.
That we shall not name.
yeah.
Yeah,
Oh my God. Yeah, like I said, everything I know about this person is against my will.
yeah,
but but he does say lots of random crap out of his mouth that's just badly researched
yeah.
just bullshit.
And I wanted to mention that you were right about Ron DeSantis.
Okay. So let's see.
He
Question.
was Gitmo.
Do you think Newsom is better on China than the GOP, being that Cali and China have a lot of mutual beneficial trade? Absolutely not. He is identical because he's not the one who's going to be controlling the foreign policy. It is the people in the Defense Department who are already like salivating over a war in China over Taiwan.
Gavin Newsom is like an archetypal dead-eyed homunculus zombie. Like he's got like no real ideas in his head. Like,
Yeah, it's gonna be just. I mean,
no, he's a mannequin.
yeah. I mean, it's gonna be. He's not running anything. I mean, it's not.
Even if he were to become president or vice president, the ones who are controlling are the psychos at the Department of Defense.
Yeah, yeah.
Plus,
Well,
he's
like,
Eskimo Donald Trump Jr.
Oh yeah. There's a really weird connection. I think Don Jr.'s current wife was Gavin Newsom's ex-wife.
Pork
ex-girlfriend.
Guilfoyle.
What'd you say?
They both porked Kimberly Guilfoyle.
They did what?
They both named Kimberly Guilfoyle. That's how they're Eskimo.
F word.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I like the word frack that they use in Farscape. No. Frack is from Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, I just finished watching that again.
Battlestar Galactica or Farscape?
Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah, they
for
use
my
frack,
fourth
and I
one.
like it because it gives you a bad association with fracking, and fracking is definitely much worse than the other action that will get us demonetized on YouTube.
Yes, that's how.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, I don't want to give him like that much credit with the verbiage. Like they're not hitting nothing that deep. There's no way.
Yeah. Well, the Democrats are paid. Somebody said if the Democrats are smart, they're paid to be willfully dumb, because their thing is not. They're just like They're like okay, so they're like the fake unions set up by the Tsar of Russia to pretend like he like the Zubatov
They're
unions.
blinders on if they put the blinders on themselves.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like their whole here's the thing. This is like the perfect illustration of the Democratic Party is with the whole debt ceiling thing that got invented during the Obama presidency when they had to come up with a reason for why they couldn't actually accomplish anything good.
Are they parliamentarian?
No. When they established the debt ceiling, what that
I'm giving you another analogous thing where they make up a random procedure like the parliamentarian.
Oh, just listen, because here's the thing: the debt ceiling thing. What this became only an issue during the Obama presidency when it started, and it continued on since then. And what this is a way for the Democrats to make concessions that kill the what little welfare state we have, and then frame it as a victory because, well, we won't default because we raised the imaginary limit of money we're allowed to borrow to do whatever bullshit for the programs we just cut to agree to raise the debt limit. And that's the
whom? That's like the U.S. is fully monetarily sovereign. IMF uses the U.S. dollar. The World Bank uses the US dollar, so the US is the lender of last resort. There's no one to borrow from for them. Like that's like totally nonsense. Like you
Exactly.
might as
Yet
well
we
still
have
talk
the
about
every fucking
wigwams.
year we have this debt ceiling fight, so the Democrats can like basically do a kayfabe thing and cave on not cutting the Social Security, Medicare. The this last one, it was the food stamp thing. Everybody on food stamps that's like able-bodied now has to like put in like 80 hours of work before they're allowed to not starve.
Yeah.
Like,
That seems to be like there
and
seems
like
to
that
be
was
a major
and the Democrats did a victory lap after that, claiming that it was like oh, but like now we raised the debt ceiling so we won't default somehow, like with the money we print.
They drive me crazy.
Slightly more relevant now since we're dropping the petrol dollar little by little.
Well, we are not. The world is. For example, Saudi
Well,
Arabia
that's
and
what like
yeah. Let's see. Are there any other questions, comments, super chat? A question. Have any of you read the book The Deep State, The Fall of the Constitution and the Rise of the Shadow Government by Mike Logren? No, we have not. And the deep state is just the state. There's
yeah,
nothing deep about it. There is a big portion of the state where they openly say that we're not going to allow citizens to know what is going on. So that's more the undemocratic nature of the state, or as Michael Parenti would say, the gangster nature of the state.
the better term that I'm liking now for this that I heard recently is parapolitics, which refers to political actions that don't happen in public.
Yep, that's Michael Parenti's term too.
Yeah, well, yeah. So, like, and this would be quote unquote conspiracy theories. The idea that powerful people come together to advance their interests, and that's like pretty much the definition of any conspiracy theory.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they don't even have to meet. If they know what their interests are, they'll end up doing the same thing. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. So eventually, like, hopefully, there'll be like a shadow IMF and a shadow World Bank that will help third world countries like have a like, let's say, have poor people have like tap water without like privatizing everything, and that is to come. Um,
What's up?
yeah. So let's see. Do we have any nonsense to discuss?
I want to know why you don't look.
I'm at
You
10% on my battery power, so I don't have time for nonsense, unfortunately.
Okay, Janet, what did you have to say?
I said I want to know why you don't look more tired than I look. That's my nonsense question.
Good point. Maybe there's like a big energy boost I get that you
You're on
don't
a
get.
second wind. You've been up for what, 24 hours?
Been up like since 6 a.m. yesterday, but what happened is I tried to take a nap, but I basically didn't sleep. I didn't get the nap, and yeah, I've been up for.
Wind thing is a physiological thing. It's real. If you like miss this, if you miss your regular sleep cycle and you don't catch it again fast enough, you get this like weird like second boost thing, and then you're not going to sleep for a while after that. It's like some weird natural amphetamine thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm gonna get a second boost soon. And yeah, that's why I'm not tired at all, even though I've been up for 26 hours.
Yeah,
Since 9 a.m.
I just want to mention in case I forget it later when we're closing out, but let us know if this format is good, like this Friday night,
Yeah.
later. I mean, we can start it even later for me and Matt. But yeah,
Let's not start
and
it
with
even
the and with
later.
the pre-records and stuff, because then we can get more interviews with people and stuff like that.
Yeah,
if
we could call it currently or realistically.
realistically. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, let's do it.
Yeah. So I think this is a good night. I think a lot of people showed up tonight.
Yep, we
So.
got over 100 viewers. Oh no, we got and we got pretty good super chats. So like we can like pick like whatever trending
It will
topic
be
or whatever interesting topic of that week, and
can switch like platforms and all that
Yeah,
like in
well,
the middle.
we're gonna make sure that I am running the platform and I'm running it on my end. Because that will, with Asha being in Russia, just in case, you know what I mean? Like it's just
Yeah.
easier
oh
for
yeah,
me
I
to
might
run
get
it.
sanctioned any moment and like get kicked off everything.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So yeah, so we were putting everything on me, but
Well,
then
two of us are in
it
the
was the last
state,
problem that
and one person's in Russia, so the one person in Russia is going to lose out on that one.
Yeah. Anyways, so what's going on? Oh, with Russia banning the LGBTQ. Okay, they actually are not doing that. The organization that they banned is funded by one of the NAD organizations. So they banned the organization not for quote unquote advocating for LGBTQ, but being funded by a hostile government with the aim to overthrow the current government, which is treason in every country.
The color of this revolution is pink.
And purple and rainbow.
Rainbow, yeah.
Exactly.
The rainbow server revolution.
I like it's the same thing. Like they try to, they come at you like with, you know, oh, the Palestinians don't like gay people, so why would you support them or
And
something
then
like that.
there's also and
In
then there's
Palestine.
also hey, cool gay Nazis with Hitler tattoos in Ukraine.
Yeah. But yeah, no. Again, I'll just repeat it for posterity because it is a fact. Homosexuality has been decriminalized in Palestine since 1960. Just
Yep.
fact.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
Oh, okay. And one more thing is that the reason why are some anti-gay laws is because U.S. evangelicals came and lobbied really hard in 2013 and spent billions of dollars. And the thing is that
I sure wish the Soviet Union was around to suppress all this religious freedom we're enjoying in Russia right now.
exactly exactly if the Soviet Union were around, things would be different. But that's it's always like that. Like I've written an article about it. The US lobbied and made homosexuality legal in Uganda, and now when Uganda is like not playing ball, they're suddenly like, oh, Uganda gay rights. So nothing the US actually says about any of these rights in any of these countries is actually in good faith.
Well, my favorite is like the DPRK is persecuting Christian religions, and the Christian religion is the fucking Moonies cult.
Oh yeah, yeah, exactly. Or
And
China
just that cult.
and China is persecuting ISIS fighters, former ISIS fighters that they've accepted, basically.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah, freedom fighters from the Eastern Turkestan independence movement. Is that what they're called?
Yeah,
Like trained by the Wahhabis and aligned with ISIS.
they're not aligned. They have been fighting inside of ISIS. And when Assad asked, like China accepted 10,000 ISIS fighters back to their country. How many ISIS fighters will America accept back?
Seriously.
Step back. We'll just accept them all to come here.
Yeah.
Well,
so,
if the ISIS fighters get a Waffen SS tattoo on their wrist, they can get into Canada and then just.
Yeah. They'd be here if they. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What book thing, if a book or a thing has radicalized you? Lenin's Collected Works, Volume 1 through 45 in English and Volume 1 through 54 in Russian. It's not because there's more works. It's just that the volumes are smaller in Russian.
Yeah, I don't think it was like any particular book. It was mostly like my uncle's Vietnam War stories that did it for me.
Well, if there's a book I would recommend is definitely cover to cover Lenin's Collected Works.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's a good start.
I saw that in Esha. I saw when you were really getting into Lenin. Like, I was there with you before you were. I mean, you had read some Lenin, but you weren't like into him. And then,
Oh yeah.
so like I saw that journey, and then I
And for
started
me, I'm
reading more
still
Lenin.
like so sometimes people laugh at me in Russia because I still get excited every time I see a Lenin statue, but there's are lots of Lenin
Yeah,
statues. So people sometimes still like
But we only
chuckle,
have the one
like,
here,
"Oh,
so
Lenin," and then they're like, yes.
yeah,
And
but
then
we all
they're like,
know
there's a
that
Lenin here, 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 and here, and here.
your excitement for Lenin it does exceed like even the biggest fans' excitement for Lenin. You're like super fan.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
like
but
yeah, we
at Lenin.
like I know, but because like I relate to him. I have a theory that he has ADHD, and I'm pretty sure he does, and I can understand him, and I relate to him, and he's such a good guy, and there's like not an ounce of like badness in him. No, no, but
what
there's
was that meme that was going around?
appreciable pettiness within him.
Yeah, what was that meme that was going around that like if I met Lenin, he would like me very much and call me sport?
Of course not.
Oh, my books. I want to say Parenti because that was like my first book was reading Parenti like back in the late '80s.
Yeah.
Oh wow. Wow, so that's like some OG parentheism.
Yeah, someone handed like it was someone lent me the book to read. I was like 19, 20.
Which one was that?
Okay,
Was
hold on.
that super
I had to
in the
figure
late
it
80s?
out. It was actually the textbook. It was the
Democracy of the Few.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one to get Lent because he always told people to not buy it because the publishers published it as he didn't write it as a textbook. It was published as a textbook to keep people from reading it. Because like no college is going to put that in their curriculum, and since it's a textbook, it costs $10,000.
Okay, so
Yeah.
Genesis asked a good question. Curiously, in Russia, he's not as beloved as Stalin. That is true. That's because Lenin died in 1924. No one alive today has ever experienced life under Lenin. But Stalin died in 1953, and a lot of people have experienced life under him, and they won the World War. Like they understand how much life has improved thanks to Stalin. So yes, you do definitely get more Stalin appreciation here. That's because there is more personal experience from people alive. That Lenin just died too early, basically.
Yeah.
I didn't live under any good leader in the United States.
Why didn't Lenin live for 100 fucking years? Like Jesus Christ.
Correct. He lived until he was 90.
I could have said that. Well, Kissinger could have lived under Lenin if he was a better person. No.
Oh, Kissinger would not have lived under Lenin. Lenin's orders were deport and shoot the white terrorists and he meant mercenaries, but he called them and the prostitutes who work with them.
Yeah.
So Kissinger would not have lived under Lenin.
Well, I said if he was a better person.
What?
If he was a better person. I just meant that he was born before Lenin died.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, just one.
Next year is the 100 year.
I know. Lenin's not dead. I go see his when you go to his mausoleum, you'll see he's like sleeping. He's not dead.
I know. I know. I know you try to get him up.
That's it.
No, they're very careful about people who like putting holy water on him.
Talking that other meme talking to Lenin's ghost, like, wait, are you they stuffed me? Like it's like, no, you're like revered, like no, they stuffed me like an animal. I'm in a glass case. I get it, but like I know why it happened. I know why it continues, but like I don't know if I ever need to like see it with my own eyes.
Oh, you have to. It's like he's not dead. He looks like he's sleeping, and you're hoping.
Yeah, I know. Like, but like I mean, it's gotta be more acrylic paint than like body at this point.
He looks like he's sleeping.
Stop ruining it for Asha. Be
Well,
nice.
I do know that like the preservation of his corpse, because he had like this really rare like genetic mutation. It's what caused his brain to turn to stone in like the last year of his life. Like the preservation of his corpse led to like a ton of like advances in genetic research, like just like because it could like preserve his genome basically.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because he didn't have any children.
Yeah.
So with that, we will have current, realistically is what we'll call it, every Friday. I will be just as pepped up, and I'll have my second wind of energy from not sleeping for 24 hours, just so I can be here at optimal time for you.
Yeah, so we'll do you want to start at 10 o'clock then, or do you want to start at
No,
9?
I want to start at 5
We
a.m. I
could
don't
also
want to
we
start
could
at 6 a.m.
we could also start earlier, like for me, like starting at like 9 p.m. on a Friday, like that seems weird.
9
Like,
p.m. seems to have no. We have had our highest audience ever, live audience. So 9 p.m. on a Friday sounds perfect.
all right, cool.
You can
No, there
do
you go.
it.
Number so high.
You've been outvoted.
No, the metrics decided here.
Oh, the metrics.
Yeah. Well, I'm at
Stop.
2% power, so like I personally have to sign off.
Okay. Anyways, let's say svobodu this is how we all end. Smrti fascismu svobodu narod, which means death to fascism, freedom to the people.
Yes.
Slava Lenina.
And that means glory to Lenin.
Yes.
Yeah.